Hello, my fellow Westorians. It is Saturday, and we are back with our monthly once a Saturday live streams featuring Sean, and we've got lots of fun stuff to talk about. It's a combo episode. We're going to be talking half the episode about, a little more than half the episode, about the Battle of Blackwater, because that's where Sean is at in the books. He just finished Clash of Kings, and hey, we never did cover the early seasons of Game of Thrones with this show, so it's time we can go back and do that and have some fun with it. It's a really important battle, and there's lots to say about it. And in the second half, we'll be covering our experiences at Con of Thrones 2019 in Nashville. We've got a couple of photos and some great stories from all three of us, so we'll be doing that in the second half. So we're really looking forward to getting this all this exciting info out to you guys. And we're glad to see you here joining us live. It's lots of fun hanging out with all our friends around the fandom, wherever you are. We hope this is a good time for y'all to be showing up Saturday afternoon. Allows us to catch people in lots of different time zones relative to where we are. We know it's not perfect for everybody, but this is about the best we can do. So
this is a good time for people on the moon.
It's a very good time for people on the moon. Got to keep up with the Moonanites. If you don't let the Moonanites see your show live, they get very upset.
Are Moonanites like Mennonites?
They're more like Womenanites, which are better than Mennonites, actually.
They're like Mennonites, except that they scoff at our mere dimensions.
So welcome back, Sean. Good to see you. And what the heck is that? It's a strange greenish color. Actually, green isn't that strange for you, but it still looks strange.
It's the protein naked drink, the green protein and greens mixed with a what do you call it? Sparkling ice?
Sparkling
Mountain
ice.
Dew.
Okay. Which flavor is sparkling ice?
Coconut pineapple.
Oh, God.
It's so good.
It's so not. I would rather drink Wildfire, which my shirt says. Valyrian Energy, Wildfire. Mm-hmm.
You keep that Wildfire away from Davos.
Well, we have appropriate shirts on today. That's what we like to do around here. Have themed shirts that match the episodes. It doesn't always work out, but today it worked out pretty well. So, real quick, a couple of shout-outs before we get started. Thanks to Talanis the Talon, King of Gagassos, Rider of Telarius, the Red Dragon with Scales, Horns, and Talons of Midnight Black. And always first, except for not today, because I said him second, Jeff Gnarly the Long Snapper, History of Westeros' first sword. Apparently second sword today, because I named the dragon first, but hey. That's the way we do live streams. Some things don't come out quite the way we intend. That's the nature of it. So this is really good timing for us with where you're at in your reread, or your read rather, and with Valar Rereadus in progress for us. We're doing that every Sunday. A lot of you guys are with us for that. But one of the problems with any reread podcast, even if you're doing 7 chapters a week or one a month, is that a lot of people read at a different schedule than that. You're not reading necessarily the exact same chapters that we're covering every week. A lot of people read ahead. Some people stay a little behind, catch up later. Everyone's on their own schedule, just like you are on with your Clash of Kings schedule. But because we're focused on foreshadowing and different things in each of these chapters, we're not actually covering every single thing in the chapter because there's just too much to cover. I mean, there's reread podcasts that spend a good 2 hours per chapter, and I could think of a lot of things that they didn't talk about, which they probably did too. And that's just the nature of it. So we'll have a lot of different things to say during Valar Rereadus when we get back to this chapter eventually. It'll be several months from now. But comparing book to show, comparing just different things that you noted, different things that I want to say, and different things from you guys in the chat who send us questions. Well, we'll do a good job here, I think. Battle of Blackwater is so cool.
It's worth noting, by the way, that when I watch the show, I watch it 2 or 3 or 4 times and take a bunch of notes. I didn't read Clash of Kings 3 times and take a bunch of notes. I'm still processing it,
Right? Yeah.
I know there's a million things I missed. I know there's all kinds of stuff that even as I was reading it several times, I wanted to go back. Like I would get to a Dany chapter, and when I go back and read the last chapter, I'm like, I just need to finish it. I can go back and read it later.
Yeah, it's really neat. That's actually where I wanted to start, was mentioning a few facts about not just the battle and the books and the show, but our perspective. Like me and Ash read the book first and then saw the show. In my case, I had probably read the chapter several times before seeing the show. Shea maybe once or twice, or at least once, but maybe twice. But you, of course, saw it several times before you read it. So you have kind of a different perspective, which is neat for us. So we were coming at it from different angles.
I may say some controversial things.
You
By
might.
the way, I think there's a few things about the show I like more than a book.
Hey, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. That'll be good. That'll be. It's good that it's good when we don't just agree on everything. So
No, it's not.
Case in point. So a couple of facts about the Battle of Blackwater before we get into the details. It's the biggest battle of the War of Five Kings, which is obviously that's really important. It's the first multi-point of view battle in A Song of Ice and Fire, and it remains the longest battle in terms of POVs in A Song of Ice and Fire as well. Even with books coming later, there's obviously other big battles, but there isn't a battle that spans, say, 6 chapters, which is rough. I mean, it's kind of rough. We want to say exactly when the battle begins, but I consider it 6 chapters. I consider the Sansa chapter when she sees the sails, the beginning of it, because that's when you get the city starts to act like it's a battle. There's the panic, there's the preparations. You got to pick a point, and that's where I pick, and I think that's fair.
Again, I have a hard time remembering, but
Right.
I feel like she was hearing the battle of Stannis' army before she saw the sails.
I believe.
don't
I'm not
remember,
sure.
but-
Yeah, the detail. There's definitely. They're aware that Stannis' army is on the other side of the river
Like, at what
before the ships come. Yes.
What point did Tyrion send Shagga and the
that was
Hill
that
tribes
was
to-
well in advance of Stannis' army arriving. They knew Stannis' army was going to arrive, and so those guys were out in the Kingswood before the army even got there.
I don't know if like becoming aware of that counts as a chapter of battle.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, you're right. That's I would say that's arguably that is part of the whole thing. It's part of that phase of the campaign. But yeah, we got to pick an arbitrary point, and I agree with that's a totally valid one. Now, as far as some other facts, it's also the first of the large battles on TV. There's several large-scale battles on TV, but this is the first one. There's other battles that happened before this one, but they're not really on screen. The Battle of Whispering Wood you don't see it basically at all. And in the books, that's basically true as well. Catelyn sees a little more of it in the books than she sees in the show, but not a lot. And so really, this is the first like huge battle for both book and show that's on screen. So that's really neat. And even though it had a lesser budget than the other battles, because Game of Thrones' budget increased every season, it's still many people's favorite, even after a lot of these higher budget, more maybe in some ways more visually stunning versions of battles. I think this is in part because it has more tension. There's more tension. There's more of the character stories in it. The things that don't have anything to do with fighting itself, although the fighting is fine too. So what does that? How does it rate for you in that regard?
I definitely liked it more going back and watching it. There are definitely subtleties that I wasn't picking up on, and I don't know how much of that was just the perspective of going back and watching it again versus knowing what was happening in the books. But I did rewatch everything before the final season, so it's not like I haven't seen it for 8 years or something.
Right,
but,
right.
But still, little things like realizing how disruptive Cersei calling Joff back was.
Right.
Realizing that's what spurred Tyrion to have to go out in a battle. Maybe Tyrion would have ended up having to do it anyway. Sometimes it's hard to say what might have been inevitable anyway. But another thought I will point out, Danny Boyle he directed Slumdog Millionaire, which won Best Picture. Also, Train Spotting is a movie he's well known for.
Okay.
He's done a wide variety of movies. And he, like many filmmakers and Game of Thrones, over time, you get a bigger budget once you kind of prove yourself and have a certain amount of success. But he has said he preferred his earlier movies when he was on a tighter budget. He felt like he did a better job when he had to figure out how to do it. He felt like when he had this huge budget, he could just do whatever. Oh, yeah, just CGI and post. We'll just hire the da-da-da-da-da. He felt like he wasn't as challenged. He didn't try as hard to be creative. And so I wonder how much of that might have been true for Game of Thrones 2, working with what they had. When you don't have a big budget for a bunch of action and special effects, well, guess what? Then you have to focus on acting and dialogue.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's almost like when a studio gives you that much money, obviously I don't know how this works really. I'm not a director or producer or anything. When they give you that much money, you almost feel obligated to spend it. Like, what are you going to do? Not spend that money? Yeah. And you almost, I see the point there. Like, if you spend it on this action stuff, then you filled those moments already.
Incidentally, Clint Eastwood, other way around. Clint Eastwood always comes in under budget.
Really?
Yeah. He
no one. I bet that's part of why he not only is he really bankable, but that's part of why just another reason why Hollywood loves him. Yeah. He saves the money and makes the money. Yeah, how nice.
Will you, Aziz, move the microphone a little bit further?
Sure.
from your face.
A little too loud, huh?
Yeah. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you for the note. So we had a couple of super chats before we got started. Let's go ahead and say thanks for that. From Jennifer Shanley Clark. Hey there. Good to see you. She said, so psyched to have the gang all back together for a live History West. And she put the gang in caps appropriately, as a fan of It's Always Sunny should. Great meeting all y'all at Con of Thrones, and thanks again for the epic King's Landing map. I won at your awesome one of your awesome panels. Positive vibes from Buffalo, New York. Well, great. Thanks for that, Jennifer. We are glad you won that. We did give away some prizes at our live podcast. Speaking of our live podcast at Con of Thrones, we got a lot of our panels were recorded. That's usually how they do it. And only one of them was lost to the recording gods. It was like a sacrifice that is made to the recording gods. It's kind of it's how things go. You know, the gods of recording are a bloody lot, and they demand a sacrifice. So that's not bad, though. Only one panel lost out of, I think, I told patrons that I think we had like 20 panels recorded, but that was an exaggeration. It's more like 14 or 15. We did that many, but they weren't all panels. Like we were in game night and other events that weren't really recorded because they weren't panels. So that's what I was thinking of when I said 20. But anyway, so we're going to be releasing most, if not all of those. We have to go through them, make sure the quality is fine. Just because they were recorded doesn't mean they came out well. So we'll be going through those and releasing them over the course of the next few months. Also, a super chat from Maura Lee for Aziz, Ashea, and the kiddies. Thank you for all the excellent content. Looking forward to hearing about your Con of Thrones experiences. Well, thank you, Maura Lee. Appreciate that very much. Maura and I were trading cat photos right before the stream started. I sent her a picture of all our 4 cats and our 1 outdoor kitty. And it's fun to share cat photos. That's modern internet life. Okay, so let's get to it. I laid out the facts. We had some intro here, but let's go to the battle. Now, of course, it's actually a good example of the show and the books hewing pretty close together. It's not super different. There's a lot of things from the show and the book that change quite a lot. I would argue that this is pretty close as far as these things go. There's obviously some significant differences. There's a lot of minor to maybe not so minor, but not super major characters who are not in the show. That's just the nature of the business. Not a complaint, just a fact. There's the battle is sort of POV style in the show, maybe more location focused than certain characters, but it generally centers around the same group of characters. In the books, the POVs are in order. Where did I put this note? It's Sansa, then Tyrion, Sansa, Davos, Tyrion, Sansa, Tyrion, Sansa again. So 2 Tyrion, 3 Sansa, 1 Davos is basically the battle, which is interesting that Sansa is half of it because she doesn't see much of the action at all. But she's seeing the action on the inside, which is very interesting. She's dealing with Cersei.
She gets word of the action from Lancel and the Hound, and which also, again, is another way to not have to spend a bunch of money on the actual battle, is to have characters who aren't in it getting reported to about it. Yeah. Which also maybe is more important, right? The details of which person slung their sword better isn't as important as the impact it has on the people inside the castle, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, make sure I said that right. I think I did say that right. Sansa, Davos, Tyrion, Sansa, Tyrion, Sansa. Yeah, I did say that right. So just a rough review of what happens in each of these chapters. The first one is Sansa. She's with Lady Tanda and Lollis, and Cersei's having a feast. That's one difference, is that in the show, they're just kind of sitting around drinking and singing. But in the books, there's actually a feast. Cersei is trying a little harder to maintain composure and to show. It's like a distraction. It's just like, yes, we're the nobility. We're going to sit here and eat and drink and maintain our composure.
Everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
Flames all around.
Yeah, it's exactly the picture of the cartoon dog saying this is fine with everything around it on fire. But instead, the fire is green. And then we have Davos, who is such an important part of the battle, but isn't really in it that much. He's out of it pretty quickly, especially in the show. The show, he's out of it right away.
Almost immediately.
Yeah, in the show, he's the leader of the fleet in the show. So he's at the front, and when Bronn launches that arrow, blows the wildfire up, he's immediately launched into the water, and we don't see him again until the next season. Or is it the last episode? I forget if we see him in the last episode or the beginning of the season. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing that happens in the books. He turns up on the spears of the Merlin King and is rescued by the Salador's ships.
And that doesn't happen until the next book.
Right.
I now know with confidence. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so Davos is thinking when he's sailing up, he's thinking about how the Admiral, Sir Imry Florent, that's another major thing missing from the show, is the presence of the Florents. They're not really in the show at all, but that's Selyse's family, and they're really important politically. They're a major force. They're not as powerful as the Tyrells, but they're one of the most powerful houses in the Reach behind the Tyrells. They're like the second tier, and they think that they should be ruling the Reach because of their close relation to Garth Greenhand. But that's a whole nother story. Anyway.
And their humbleness.
Yeah, and their humbleness. That's right. The Florents are a big deal, even after this battle, even after Sir Imry is killed. They're a huge part of the books that didn't make the show. So Davos sails up. The difference, of course, in the scene with Davos is that since he's not the leader of the army or of the navy in the books, he's behind. And it's actually his ships that get blown up in either case, because in the books, it's not an arrow launch that starts the wildfire. It's one of the lagging ships that rams one of the hulks that's loaded with wildfire, and that causes the explosion. But by that point, 30 to 40 ships have already passed it, and they land successfully. They do their job without getting interfered with by the wildfire. Then we have a Tyrion chapter where
it was also, can I point out another difference between the show and the book? I don't know how much we want to focus on that throughout here, but it was more of there was more of a battle in the book. In the show, it was like that one lone ship.
You're right.
And Davos and the fleet were like, "What's going on here?" Whereas in the book, they were outnumbered, but it was part of Davos's frustration with Imry.
Yeah.
Is it they had them outnumbered, but going through this corridor, of water, the numbers didn't matter. You know what I mean? If they can have,
it's like fighting on a bridge. Like
right?
You can't
if they have
them.
80 ships, but there's only 10 on the front line, and the other side has 20 ships and 10 on the front line, well, the 70 of your ships just don't matter.
It's just 10 on 10. Yeah.
Which I thought that was a neat moment when Davos. I can't remember what it was he was hoping for, but he was hoping that there would be some obstruction, so that Imry would have to stop and reevaluate. He thought they were just charging in without scouting it.
Mm-hmm. And Imry was very confident because he knew that the King's Navy was really small, and he's just like,
And he was behind. That was another key thing, is that Stannis was already engaged in battle on the ground.
That's true. And
they were late arriving, so there was some pressure to hurry up.
That's not portrayed on the show. You're right. Well, two things. The ship-to-ship battles, which are significant. Davos even has a boarding scene where he fights another captain, or not another captain, but just kills a guy. And there's another moment lots of moments, where you see the arrow fire and stones being traded between the ships and the castle. And there's just siege kind of arrows and missiles going back and forth. And then, like you said, the destruction happens. The wildfire explodes, and that spreads, and then the chain is pulled. Of course, that's another major thing missing from the book, or from the show, is the chain. The chain is pretty important because of the way, because it keeps all the ships together. It keeps them from backing away from the wildfire. And, of course, a navy is so hard to replace. Navies are super, super expensive. Ships take a long time. Don't let Euron's 1,000 ships fool you. I don't think it did fool you, but just in case. Ships are really expensive and long to build. Just think about how many books pass. A full 2 books pass before Cersei has 10 new warships built in A Feast for Crows. And, well, we know what happens to those. Sean maybe doesn't, but it's a good story. You'll get to it. You'll like it. It's not in the show. And so the next chapter is Tyrion, and that's, of course, on the other side of the battle. Tyrion's on the inside. You see, he's actually very concerned about Joffrey's safety. It's interesting to see. He's like, close your visor, He knows how important that is, even though he doesn't like Joffrey at all.
It was only a quick line, but there was this extra motivation for him to keep Joffrey safe, because Cersei had the girl
who she thinks is Shay,
but he still is concerned for her. He still doesn't want her to suffer.
Absolutely, that's a great point. Yeah, he's because they've kind of threatened each other. Whatever happens to Joffrey happens to her, and he's like, well, whatever happens to her happens to Joffrey. And she's like, I don't believe you. And he's like, try me, And it's really something. So it's really interesting to me that I don't know if this is intentional on George's part, but Tyrion's first battle, of course, in the books, it's this is I may have misspoken before. The Green Battle of the Green Fork is before this battle, and that's a major battle. Yeah, I did say that wrong, didn't I? Yeah, the Green Fork battle is.
I don't think you said that.
Okay, I thought I said it was the first major battle of the books. I guess that's I may have said that. If I did, that was wrong.
Maybe,
if I didn't, maybe not.
We didn't see much of that battle.
That battle on the show is not shown. Yeah, Tyrion gets knocked unconscious and then wakes up and it's over. So it's definitely not on the show. It's off screen. But it's neat that that's the Battle of the Green Fork, and now he's in this battle of green fire. So it's this kind of theme, I suppose. Now, a big part. This is the chapter where Tyrion has to make the decision to lead the charge. It's not the one where he actually makes the charge. That's his next chapter, but he decides that he has to, and it's of course a big part of it is because the Hound is broken. He's done 3 sorties, lost half his men, he says, and he's, as Tyrion notes, he's dead on his feet. And you get a lot of the same exact lines from show to book. He talks about, no, give me a drink, no, give me wine. He says, F the king.
He doesn't say F the king in a book.
Oh, you're right. He says that to Sansa, I think.
He might say it later on. I don't remember, but I think he did say F the hand.
Yeah, he does say that. Because Marin's like, the hand gave you an order, and he's like, F the hand.
Yeah.
So he just, and that's what, and of course the key, which I think the show portrays this pretty well, but in case it's not clear, the fact that the Hound, of all people, won't go back out there just ruins everyone else's morale, and that's part of what makes Tyrion realize that he has to do. And this is a part of the show that I really like. Tyrion's, the way Peter Dinklage does his acting here.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, not that I don't want to give credit to his acting, but there is some amount of writing or directing in there. The way he kind of he's like thinking out loud. He's like, you can, like from the books, his brain is like processing what needs to happen, and he just thinks out loud. He says, I'll lead the charge. I'll lead the attack.
But he almost
and he's
whispers
like, oh wait, I'll lead the attack. It's like it's disconnected from it being himself. It's hard for him to even think it. But when he realizes it is sort of a moment of courage to accept that and do it. It's the thing that he wanted Joffrey to do.
Yeah.
Like, you need to stand out here and be the leader. Well, I'm not qualified. I'm scared. Like, it doesn't matter. You have to do it anyway. That's your role here. I'm not doing it. I'm going back to my mommy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it. Whoa, wait a minute. I'll do it. Yeah. It was a good progression.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's a really good. That's the exact kind of thing that we talk about in what makes this battle stand out among some of the others. Is this tension, this character conflict, this like a guy psyching himself up to be a leader, and so that's basically the way the chapter ends is him making that decision and starting to get ready, but not actually the actual action is his chapter after this, where we're in this sort of alternating Tyrion Sansa combo here of chapter. So this Sansa chapter. Oh, you have something to say?
Well, yeah, because this is getting ahead of some things that happen in the show that didn't happen in the book.
Okay, go ahead.
Which are examples of things that I thought were really good. Some of what happens in the show that are changes, I think, are understandable because you just can't have that many characters. There's no way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, whoever's out there that loves the books and thinks they're better in the show. Imagine you were at HBO and you were in charge, and this show is being pitched to you, and they told you that we're going to have 80 named characters in this episode. 80 named characters. Like, I don't know if we can do that. You know what I mean? Like, and so they narrow down, they consolidate some characters into Bronn. He becomes more central. He takes on the role of multiple other people, right? Which gives him more time to make a charismatic character or a memorable character. And you get some cool moments like that interaction between him and the Hound, which didn't happen in the book at all. That was kind of I'm going to say, I guess it wasn't really a tentpole moment. It's a tentpole moment for fans of the Hound and or Bronn.
Oh, okay.
But it brought a lot out there,
Mm-hmm.
And oh shoot! The other thing I was going to say, I feel like there was some other thing that.
You think about it for a second. I'll make a comment from the chat here. A lot of people pointing out how important Sandor was this episode, which is something I wanted to mention as well. When I was talking about who the show POVs were, we went over the book POVs because those are straightforward. The show's POVs are Sansa, I think, with maybe a little Cersei because she gets her own scene at the end in the throne room, but mostly around Sansa. Then you have Tyrion, clearly. And Davos at the beginning kind of poured it over to Stannis from the battle point of view. Stannis isn't it's mostly just a battle from Stannis' point of view, but it's fair to call that a point of view, I think, even though there's no real conflict for him other than people running away at the end. And but the Hound for sure, I think, is the other main character who's featured in the battle, both in the show and the books, even though he's not a POV character. And it seems like a lot of people in the chat noticed that. One person in particular says that it's kind of the moment where he really becomes a major character in the show. A lot of people see that this is the battle / the scenes that really make him come more to the forefront. It's kind of his moment in a lot of ways. Not that it wasn't other people's moments, but
They also, I don't know how to say this exactly, but they bring out the fact that he's more gray. It's okay. So this is like some things about my perspective going into it. Even though I hadn't read the books, when I started to watch the show, I knew, I've mentioned this before, but I had multiple friends who were like intelligent, educated, kind people who thought Jaime was their favorite character. So my first impressions of Jaime, I just knew there has to be more to this. Does that make sense? So the Hound, same thing. Like, he starts off very cold and quiet and mean and angry.
Yeah.
But here in the show, more so in the book, you see this other side of him. You see him have fear. You see him, I don't know if rebel is quite the right word, but he's not just going to blindly, even though so far he just killed the butcher boy like it was told. But at this point, he's like, no, it's too much, it's too far, F this, you know.
Yeah.
It brings a lot in his character out. And now this is going to lead me to a couple other thoughts. It brings more out of Bronn, that we already kind of talked about how he generally is getting more featured in this than in the book.
Yeah.
But specifically, as a warrior, we again see him be successful as a warrior. He kind of saves the Hound, you know?
He does.
And so in the show, like for the sake of storytelling, the books too, I suppose, you need to have these warrior characters. You need to believe that they're formidable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so this does that. This gives us that. And it leads to maybe a minor complaint that I have, a difference, I think, in the book and the show. Both of them have this, but the book just went a little bit farther. Tyrion's value, the key to Tyrion's character isn't that he can run around with a sword really well. He is this leader, this strategist, or whatever. And I think in the book, there was a lot more of that. We'll talk about it in a minute. But Tyrion does go charging out and kills a bunch of people. Like, never mind, like, the effects of wildfire, which maybe multiple people are responsible for. But he takes his axe and chops people down left and right.
Yeah, he's on a horse. And he's got with Kingsguard around him, and he's formidable.
And it does show that he is brave, right? That it is meaningful for him to decide to go out and charge the battle.
Yeah.
That he's not just on his horse at a distance. He is running around there endangering himself.
Or just making the order to kill so many people with wildfire. He was willing to get his hands bloody.
He got his hands dirty, yeah.
But and before the battle too, like kicking commoners off of the wharf and like moving houses and like doing things to the city to prepare it for battle that people were not happy about.
Yeah. But he's got this bigger picture in mind.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that it did more. The show keeping him out of battle as much keeps him from seeming as dark a character. Like, I remember multiple times, geez, Tyrion. Yeah, like, hey, you know, his hands are dirtier in the book than in this.
And you know to look for that, having seen most of the show before getting too deep in the books, you know to look for darker Tyrion, because it's something people talk about, and it stands out just because he is a lot darker. Even without you being told, you can just notice it. Yeah. And
it makes sense in the show that they want to keep him more protagonistic. So having him not slaughter people left and right, I think helps with that, for better or worse, right? And also, it keeps his role more as the strategist and the leader, not as this warrior that runs around. Like, if Tyrion can run out and kill 7 people, like, well, no big deal that Bronn can also. You know, it's more exciting or impactful for Bronn to kill people left and right when Tyrion just gets knocked unconscious at the beginning of the battle, you know?
Okay, so moving on a little bit here. So after he decides he leads the charge, we cut over to Sansa in the books, and we have, again, somewhat similar scenes. Cersei and Sansa together. One difference is that Cersei stops drinking in the book. She starts to get a little flushed, but she stops. So she's definitely tipsy, but she stops drinking, whereas in the book, in the show, she kind of keeps going. It doesn't really seem to make a difference, though. She doesn't get outright drunk. She's just
as far as
medicating. She's self-medicating because of all the stress and anxiety, which is pretty understandable. But you get the scene where she orders Joffrey to be retrieved, which causes chaos in both show and book, and is kind of, even though Cersei is I'd say she's a little bit stronger and tougher in the book. She's a little more poised, but this mistake is very important on both show and book. And it's shown a little bit differently. The Kettle Blacks are involved in the books. They're not in the show at all. And they're not super important, but they're present, and they become more important later. We also have Moon Boy present in the room with and Sir Ilyn Payne. Now, Sir Ilyn Payne is present in both show and book.
And Dantos too, right?
Dantos is present in both, but he's not. He's barely there in the show. You see him
see
for
his
a
face
minute,
one time.
but in the show, in the book, he's very important because he's the one who tells Sansa at the end what happens, and he's of course trying to encourage her. They have this long running plan to escape that's developing, and backing up a little, we get the scene where what's happening with the retreat. We have Tyrion at one gate and Joffrey at another. Joffrey's flinging antler men, which were those people that tried to turn to Stannis from the inside, and that didn't go so well for them. We have Lancel kind of playing a similar role in both. He's with Tyrion, and of course Tyrion has fully, won him over, so to speak, with his arrangement, and he challenges Cersei about Joffrey in front of Sansa, and Cersei does the same thing. She slams her hand into his wound, which is like, damn, Cersei,
Yeah.
ow, what the hell is that all about? And that wound
I'd
ends
rather
up
Cersei
being...
use her other weapons on me.
Yes, the one she describes. The woman has another weapon. Yeah, don't use your hand in my wound, please. But that is a big part of their conversation, Sansa and Cersei talking about what happens when they lose. Mostly it's Cersei telling Sansa what happens. And Sansa...
A lot of that went just in the show, just like in the book. Like, Sansa asking about Ellen Payne, Cersei glosses over it. Then later on, she's like, here's the deal, kid.
Yeah, let me tell you why he's here. And she talks about how if it was anyone but Stannis, I could, try to seduce him. And by the way, that's a huge, important factor. Cersei is kind of channeling the entire city. And all these guardsmen. I think this is another reason this battle is so amazing. Is the morale of Stannis' men is great, but the morale of the King's Landing defenders is terrible. For one thing, one really important missing character from the show is Sir Jacelyn Bywater. He's basically Tyrion's right hand man. Right hand. He's missing his right hand. He's Iron Hand. He's sort of like the proto Jaime in a way, because he has an iron hand where Jaime comes along with his golden hand.
There's no one like Jaime.
Yeah, there's no man. There's no man like him. Just him. But Bywater is hugely important for Tyrion getting the battle, getting prepared for the battle, and of course he dies during the battle. And he says something very prophetic. He says that, look, these are city guardsmen, and you have sellswords, and some of these knights are pretty useful, but these are city guardsmen. They're not loyal to the crown. They're guardsmen. And if it's going badly, they're going to break and run, and they're going to break badly. And that's exactly what happens. And it happens because Cersei sends the Kettle Blacks to bring Joffrey away from the battle. That's what causes the retreat. And Bywater himself tries to stop them. He's like, tries to rally them. He's like, what are you doing, you cowards? Get back out there, fight. And according to, I think it's Bronn is the one telling the story later, it almost worked. But then someone shot him in the neck with an arrow, and then they just, that was that. And that's just a really important part of this, is just how bad the King's Landing morale defenders is. Because these City Watch, they're not Lannisters, they're not Baratheons, they're not anything. They're city guardsmen. If they were to not fight, and Stannis were to just march into the city and take the throne, he would just hire them all back.
They would just keep getting city guardsmen.
Yeah, there's very little motivation for them to fight. The reason they're fighting is because Tyrion and Cersei and all these people are forcing them to. They do not want to fight for the Lannisters or the Baratheons. They just want to have peace. It's that whole conundrum that Jorah said. They don't want this. They don't want that. They just want the High Lords to... to be they just want to be left alone when the High Lords play their Game of Thrones. And this is the worst part of the High Lords playing their Game of Thrones, these big giant battles where so many innocents die. You got all these people that do not want to be here, that don't care. They're just forced to be here. They're forced to fight. And there's very little in it for them, too. They're like, what is the reward of them winning? But they're so afraid. The tactic that Tyrion and Cersei use, it's very effective, is they scare people into what Stannis is going to do to them. Stannis isn't going to do anything to them. He's going to come in, take over the city, and be a king. I mean, he might do some bad things. He's
probably going to burn a few people.
He might burn a few people, but Tyrion and Cersei make it sound like they're going to burn a lot of people. And they're going to make it like, oh, he's worshiping this dark red god. And that scares the hell out of people. He's like, he's already burned the seven. He's already done all this. And so people are terrified of him. And even though it's very much overblown.
I don't want to take too much away from your point, but it's not completely overblown. Because,
no, it's not. You're right.
Right, because Stannis, part of why they might be scared of Stannis, Tyrion and Sansa don't have to spend, Tyrion and Cersei don't have to spend it too far. That Stannis is burning people who don't switch religions.
It's an easy sell. The propaganda works, kind of sells itself because you're right. He is burning people. He did burn the Seven and some other lords and things like that. He is worshiping the strange, quote unquote, strange red god and has this sorceress with him. Of course, Mel Hunter didn't actually come to the battle, but everybody kind of expected that she'd be there. They heard about her and all that.
But people will, at least in public, switch their religion for the sake of peace and security or whatever, you know.
So the next phase of the battle is we go back outside to Tyrion. He leads this charge. Like you said, there's a lot more actual action in the book. He actually kills several people, and he's got Kingsguard with him, helping him fight, and that makes a lot of difference. And especially because they're effective. He's got Podrick with him, of course. Podrick is with him in both. Always Podrick. Podrick is cool. But this is so in the books there's a huge difference here, and this is one of those where you just absolutely forgive the show for not including this. Is the bridge of boats. It's like you got horses riding on collapsing ships with fire everywhere. It's like there's no way they could film that, but it's still a really important scene. This is actually in the show. Tyrion says, "These are brave men, let's go kill them," but in the books he says that to the men crossing the bridge of boats. Same line, slightly different use, but whatever. It's also when he gets badly wounded by Mandon Moore, who, that's a whole nother story, like why Mandon Moore did that. It's still debated in the fandom, by the way, who sent him. People still don't know for sure. I have my thoughts. We'll come back to that some other time after you've had a chance to read through it and make your
Tyrion
decision.
Thinks it's Cersei.
Right.
That doesn't mean it was.
Right. The other candidate's Littlefinger, because Mandon Moore is from the Vale.
It could be Joffrey.
Yeah, it could be Joffrey. You're right. There are other candidates, but I think Joffrey is generally not included on that list, but it's definitely possible. And so he's.
So wait a minute, you're saying all the mysteries of the books haven't been solved?
Maybe there's a few left. And so he's got his horrible facial wound from that, and Mandon Moore is immediately killed, just like in the show. He goes overboard in the books instead of just being stabbed through the face.
So another difference between the books and the show,
sure,
that I think that they made up for the battle across the bridge of sinking boats.
Yeah,
was that wildfire explosion. I think that was the most spectacular thing I think that had happened. I think there's only one other thing competing with that for. I want to use the word awesome. The word awesome's kind of like lost its meaning because like, oh, those new shoes are awesome. But, the idea of like awe-inspiring, that explosion was like, and the characters' reactions around too was really, really awesome. And I think the only thing up to that point that compares to that was Dany's dragons being born. And even since that, there's only maybe a couple moments of the show that have been that impressive.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because you don't know what's gonna happen. Wildfire is like it's been built up to be this deadly, burning instant, but you didn't know it was gonna blow up like that.
Yeah,
you didn't know it was gonna be this giant. You thought it was just gonna be like fire and spreading, but a giant explosion. Wasn't certain about that until we saw it.
And it was another little moment that we got from the show that the book couldn't do was the people's reactions to it.
Yes.
Tyrion was like, almost seemed like he regretted it. It's like, oh, I didn't know I was going to do that. And Joffrey was kind of a little giddy. He's like, ooh.
Joffrey loved it.
Yeah. It was a really good moment. So, like in just an image, a flash of an image, like in 3-ish seconds, we got such development of those characters and that imagery.
And interestingly, too, Joffrey doesn't know. He doesn't know what's going to happen.
That's true.
So he's kind of yelling at Tyrion like,
hurry up, what are you waiting for?
Hurry, do it, and he's like, and Tyrion's just like ignoring him.
Yeah.
Another interesting character. We touched on this a little bit before with Cersei and talking about women's weapons. Some of the same dialogue as present in Book and Show, which I appreciate. She talks about they're bleeding out here, you're bleeding in here. It's like, damn, Cersei. But and all that talk about what happens during a sack, and that is discussed in a couple of different ways. Cersei talks about how awful men get when during a sack, which is interesting because we know from later that Stannis would not stand for a sack. Stannis would not have allowed a sack. It may have happened anyway because he can't control it, but he had some of his soldiers gelded for raping wildlings after the battle at the Wall, when he rescues the Wall from the wildlings and Mance Rayder. So that is actually not something that would happen, not to any great degree, of course. Like Cersei says, they lose control. But Stannis actually is, they're not the Unsullied, where they're not going to do anything without being ordered to. But Stannis keeps his men under control more so than any other commander that I can think of. And that same conversation also comes up where Cersei said she'd rather face 1,000 swords than be helpless like this, and that conversation is carried over. And also, interestingly, we have Shay in both book and show. Shay is mentioned casually, like Cersei says, that pretty maid, a Lady Tanda, she certainly won't be safe, and that's Shay.
Yeah.
But of course, Shay in the show is a much older character. Not old, obviously. Sybil Kelly's not old, but she's not 18, which is what book Shay is. And you have some crossover of Shay and Dantos from book to show, giving Sansa advice on what to do. And
you also get Cersei directly confronting Shay.
Yes.
It kind of gets interrupted by, I think, Lancel coming in with news, but you were afraid for her for a moment, like Cersei's gonna dig out who she was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and that's not in the book, because she's mostly just points her out and then kind of forgets, that's it. There's no other talk about her. But that's another example of some other characters that are around. You have Lady Tanda, you have Lawless Stokeworth, who is her daughter, and that's eventually, Bronn eventually goes all Stokeworth.
That was another, as you were pointing out earlier, the morale within the city. In the books, there are people within the city like raiding and looting.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And Cersei's like, chop their heads off and put them on spikes. We can't let this start.
Yeah, because once it gets out of hand, it's like a tide, or it's like the wildfire. Once the fire starts, it spreads.
And she tells Sansa, she's like, one day, learn from this. You need people to be more afraid of you than alternatives. That's the way to lead. And Sansa, by the way, it's like, love, not hate. I'm not going to use hate or fear. I'm going to use love.
That's a perfect example of stuff that I wanted to talk. That we're going to cover again when we come back to this episode in Valar Rereadus, because there's Sansa Queen foreshadowing big time in this chapter, as well as Tyrion's destructiveness, as well as some other things that we're not covering at all. But there is some amazing foreshadowing for other plot lines that we just don't have time to cover today. But just goes to show how much is going on here. So let's talk a little more about Sansa and Cersei and those scenes outside of the battle. Another thing that happens in both is the singing. There's the singing in the sept. Sansa leads the singing, and that's pretty important. That keeps the women a little calm, gives them something to do, fills them with a little bit of faith, which is important. And that's a good segue to some questions that we got here.
By the way, it's also a good example of the show and the final season in season 8, Sansa, down in the crypts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a failing. I feel like
exactly.
I feel like those lessons that she was learning there with Cersei should have been reflected in the final season, but didn't. That was a big miss,
Stephen Stark says, Aziz is a legend. Shay is the best. Sean is the Prince of Luxembourg. Thank you, Stephen.
If you say it enough times, it'll become true.
Yes, let's do it. Let's petition to make Sean the actual Prince of Luxembourg. We can do it. Social media.
I don't want it.
Stephen Stark also asked, during the battle, Sansa sings a song to Sandor and it calms him. Also, Davos prays to the mother and is saved. Evidence of the Seven in action. We'll talk about Sansa and Sandor a little bit later, but let's talk about the Davos part, because I definitely.
Well, hey, let's talk about how the Seven are real. They're like making a difference.
Well, it might be. That's his kind of what he's getting at here, and it's true. Davos prays to the mother and is saved. Meanwhile, his 4 sons / 1 son in the show are devout R'hllorists now, and they all die. And meanwhile, it's true what Sansa, this point about Sansa, she sings to Sandor, it kind of calms him down. He cries, in fact, in the show, or in the book, not in the show. He's a little less emotional about it in the show, but it's still a very moving scene, and it kind of shows that Sandor is really important. And but we'll talk about that a little more later, sticking to this bit about the Seven. And there's another example, if I can, I'm forgetting it though. But yeah, so that's kind of interesting, because there's throughout the books, it's generally accepted that the Seven don't seem to have any real power. But if you want to look for it, well, this is maybe not evidence, but it's something. It's evidence. It just isn't necessary. It's not conclusive evidence, but it's something. And certainly Sansa survives and gets out of some of the worst things. She gets out of her marriage to Joffrey shortly after this, which is she does thank the mother in prayer for that one later too, even though she knows she can't do it in public because it would be embarrassing for
that was crown. Interesting too, by the way. In the book, she seemed to know that was happening.
Yeah,
it seemed to be set up, and she was just like watching it unfold. When the show, she seemed to be able to remember, like, oh, really, like,
or is she pretending because she has to? It's kind of unclear whether she realizes she has to act. She's supposed to act bereft that she's no longer going to marry Joffrey.
Oh,
like,
no.
oh no.
Are you gonna throw me in a briar patch too?
I can't recall if Cersei even tells her to look. You better look. You know, if she says a comment, I can't recall. Doesn't say anything like that. Okay, I couldn't recall.
It's possible that Sansa remembered someone telling her to.
Okay,
it's possible.
I should have looked that up, but it just now occurred to me. Okay, so backing up to another question from Brendan B. What battles coming up in the books do you think will end up being even larger than Blackwater? Okay, I guess that's a question for me. I would say that the upcoming Battle of Fire it has the makings of a huge battle in Marine there. It's already multi-POV. We've already got Barristan and Victarion and Tyrion involved, so that could be... And it could get even bigger than that. So it's at least as many POVs.
Do you think that'll have more POVs than the Battle of Ice? I think definitely than the Battle of Blood.
Yeah, I think the Battle of Blood probably is only going to have maybe 2, and that's the one that looks like that's the Battle of Blood. If y'all don't recall, is the Euron battle that's about to happen at the start of the next book, or around the start of the next book. There's so many battles about to start at the start of the next book.
Yeah, there's a Euron battle, and then there's a Slaver's Bay battle.
The Slaver's Bay, and there's obviously the Battle of Ice, right? Which is the Battle of the Bastards in the show. This is the equivalent. It's set up to be pretty different, but it's I don't think that one will be as many POVs. You might get a Yara, you might get, or Asha rather, and you might get a Theon. You might get, it's hard to say, but I think the Battle of Fire is probably our best bet for. Very likely to be as big or bigger than Battle of Blackwater. After that, it's just impossible to say. We don't know what battles will happen. But
it seems like the Battle of Wildfire should be bigger than the Battle of Fire.
Good point. Certainly, there'll be some action with the Golden Company and some battles. Unlike the show, they won't just get blown up. But that's just hard. That's really hard to predict. So I would definitely say best top pick is Battle of Fire, though. I think that's a really good call. Okay, that's all the questions for the moment. Let's continue.
I wanted to back up, by the way, because I remember the thing I wanted to point out.
Sure.
That was one of my favorite moments the whole series. The moment that I started liking, that Sansa became my favorite character.
Okay.
And it was similar in the books and the show, but definitely better in the show. When Joffrey's about to head out, they cross paths. Lots of good interaction in that whole thing. Tyrion says, Sheila? Because he's got to pretend to not even know who she is, you know. But that whole scene was really good. That didn't happen in the books, and it's when Sansa says, tells Joffrey, like, "Will you be leading? You know, the vanguard from outside the wall?" And he's like, "Stupid girl, you don't know anything about military command." I was like, "Oh, you're right. I am stupid. Of course you'll be leading the vanguard,
just like my brother."
Yeah,
because that's where my brother always is.
And he's an imposter. You know?
And he's like, "Kiss my sword."
Joffrey's just like seething.
He so good.
Can't retaliate.
It's exactly like what she does to Ramsay later. He's like, another bastard, you know? When he's talking to him, it's like, Tommen said I'm legit. See, he's a bastard too. Yeah. It's like, she's really good at that. It's wonderful.
And it's like, I've said this a million times, but it's why I appreciate her character so much, because unlike the other Stark kids, who were all had these naive ideas of what they wanted, and it's not panning out well, but they still get to run around with a horse and a sword. Rob is still out there with an arm, you know, but she's locked up. Her day-to-day success is not getting beaten and raped.
Yep.
And still, she's sticking it to Joffrey a little bit. Yeah, screw you, you know?
Love it. Yeah, good call. Very good call. Another thing I noticed that I didn't catch this at all before, is the parallel between Cersei saying drink and forcing Sansa to drink. You drinking, which is very similar to right before, like in between the tournament, when Ned and Robert are sitting there, and Robert is the breastplate stretcher scene, when Robert's like, drink, your king commands it. And he's just like making you sit there and listen. It's like, you're going to listen to me talk, and you're going to drink while I'm talking. And it's like, okay. So it's a parallel, Cersei and Robert there. They have more in common than they necessarily let on.
Yeah.
I thought that was really neat. And let's back up also to a really good show scene that's not in the book, is that the bar scene with the Hound and Bran. Which, like you said, it's part of the reason they did that is to establish those two as being more formidable, to remind everybody. And it also has another scene of singing and people being tense before a battle and all that, which is just really cool. Did you have any thoughts on that?
What song was it that they sang?
They sang the Rains of Castamere.
Yeah. I remember the theme playing even earlier in season 2, if I remember right. It might have been like episode 2, which, I don't know, just kind of makes me believe that they had a long-term plan, how things were going, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we see that again in season 8, really.
Yeah.
The night before, but they're singing where Pod is singing.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
That was Jenny's song, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
And it was a
Good.
beautiful moment. You know?
Really good, yeah. When they do songs on the show, I love it because when George writes the words, you like that he takes to the effort to actually write the words on the page, but you had to invent the melody in your head if you can. A lot of times for me they end up sounding like some sort of nursery rhyme because Roy Dotrice ends up doing that with a lot of the audiobooks. He sings it like some of those Christmas songs. I can't even remember the one I'm thinking of.
I want to hear your rendition of Roy Dotrice rhyming a song.
I'm totally blanking out on how he sings it. He does it like one of these common nursery rhymes, and it's like I'll think
like
of it
Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's something really basic. I've said it before on the stream too, and I'm just blanking out.
I always hear the old animated Lord of the Rings. That's how I hear it because Tolkien incorporated a lot of songs, and he just put them all into the Lord of the Rings movies, the animated ones from the 70s. So there's these weird extended sequences of like goblins marching, singing the song, But that's like how I hear the Martin songs as I read them.
I see Mandolin 523, aka Mandy Helton, who did a wonderful Werewood cosplay at Con of Thrones, commented, "All my northern ladies, put your hands up. We don't need a man to man up."
Yeah, in the chat, they've been talking about how Sansa is Sansa Fierce, Queen
Sansa
in the
Fierce,
North. Yeah.
That is wonderful. The chat is always lit during our streams. It's great. Y'all are killing it in there. I wish I could pay more attention to the chat. It's one of my regrets of being on the stream is I can't see what everybody else is saying. It's FOMO.
You just gotta bow out one of these days and let Sean and I take the lead.
I should, yeah. I can run. I'm not as good at running things as you are, but I could manage, and then I'd get to read all the chat. Yeah, we'll do that one of these days. Definitely, that's a good idea.
One of these days, we could just sit here and read the chat out and just say...
You guys run the stream. Yeah. We just sort of facilitate.
Chat stream.
Okay, so some other moments that are really important. As far as some of the action goes, there's a lot of similarity in some of the basics, but of course there's more detail, more complexity in the book. Like I said in the show, Stannis sails forward. Many ships are destroyed by wildfire, and then Stannis says, "Okay, well, there's their trick. They don't get to do that twice. Keep going." And then he lands a bunch of ships. In the book, it's similar, but it's the ships in the front that get through and the ships in the back that get blown up.
And we're not seeing Stannis at all. He's just not in it at all.
Stannis is leading from the rear.
Once again, it's understandable. I'm not upset that we didn't get Stannis' perspective in the book because I think it's genius the way the Martin picked out different POVs to give us. However, it was a great moment when Stannis is like, "All right, this changes nothing. This is fine."
He's like, hundreds will die. He's like
thousands.
Yeah.
Undaunted.
And that's not cruelty. That's not ruthlessness. That's just Stannis being correct.
Yeah.
He's like, no,
this
thousands.
is the mission. Yeah.
He's like, no, it'll be thousands.
Yeah.
Fewer or more. Not fewer, more. Morer. But you're right. And the part of the thing in the books is Stannis isn't with the Navy. He's with his army on the other side of the Blackwater, waiting to be crossed over or waiting to be bridged over. An interesting moment when the Sir Emery's fleet arrives, the warning to King's Landing is 3 horn blasts. Which is, you always got to pay attention when there's 3 horn blasts.
By the way, there was a Dany chapter where she kept thinking about all the 3s.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
She is child
I didn't even
of 3.
think about that for the 3 horn blasts. Yeah.
There's so many 3s in just her first chapter. It's or in her marriage chapter. It's crazy. You have to go back and check that out.
But she's not actively thinking about it.
She's not. They're just there.
There's a scene when she started thinking about it.
Okay. That's different. When she starts to be aware of it. And so, like you said earlier, I
think it was when 3 ships is when
okay.
Strong Belwest,
yeah,
and Strong Beard, because these guys can't get very creative, show up with 3 ships to bring her back. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah.
And she starts reflecting on all the 3s that have come up. Yeah,
yeah, that's cool.
3 revenges. Yeah, she's thinking about the
3 treasons.
The treasons. That's what it was.
She's got 3 handmaids, 3 blood riders, 3 eggs.
She was speculating on what the 3 might be. It was neat to read that, knowing where things are going. No, that's not. This isn't the one. Yeah. So, along with Book Davos here, along with the 3 horn blasts, you get. We talked about his ship-to-ship fighting against the ship called the White Hart. We talked about the missiles and the stones and all the fire. What's interesting is that Sir Emery actually warns the fleet to expect wildfire. They just had no idea that there would be so much. Yeah.
They thought it would be a small amount. That they was like, "Don't worry about it. They'll run out quickly." It's like, oops, they did not run out quickly.
Is that Arrested Development style?
Oh yeah. And Davos has all these really Davos's POV is perfect because he's a smuggler and he's so good at observing. And as you say, as Sir Imry is just barreling forward, heedless, Davos is like, wait a second. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? What are those towers doing there? He notices the winch towers, and then he sees the chain. He's like, but he doesn't know what they're going to do with it.
It's like, it doesn't matter if they split us in half. We're still just going to land.
Yeah.
Like,
he says that'll be just a minor delay. How could this be their plan? So he's so confused, and it's one of those moments where we're not confused. We don't exactly know how the chain and wildfire are going to work, but we know what Davos doesn't, which is what the plan actually is.
Yeah.
So we see also that Tyrion has some of his plans have worked pretty well in that he's blocked a lot of the ports. Like the keys have burnt hulks in them so that Stannis' ships can't just easily land and drop men off. So they have to go around the ports to find other spots to land, which in the meantime exposes them to more missile fire. So there's a longer time where they're in range of weapons and are taking more hits, and ships are catching fire, men are being hit by arrows, all that. So on the show and book shows the next part pretty well, or pretty similarly, which is once they start landing, Stannis starts landing men, they start bringing the battering ram up, and that's when we see the scene where Tyrion leads the men out the side, and you see in both show and book they overturn the battering ram and stop that. But then a much larger army shows up, which is Stannis having landed more of his men. And that's when you get the equivalent in the show. It's just an overwhelming battle where there's guys on both sides, and Tyrion very quickly gets his face cut. In the book, you have the bridge of boats, so it's a little more extended. There's a little more slaughter. And then Tyrion's wound, which is also much more substantial, but lands him in a similar spot. And then pretty similarly, once the battle is lost, once Stannis' men are turning around because of the assault on the south side of the Blackwater, of the sneak attack, which, now this is the part I want to get your opinion on, because you haven't read all the aftermath stuff yet, because a lot of that's the beginning of A Storm of Swords. So this is partly we're going to avoid some of this stuff, because you haven't even gotten there. I've accidentally spoiled a few things for you already when we were talking about it offline, because I don't exactly have in mind where exactly everything is. I know what all the things that happen, basically, but I forget whether some things are talked about right after or in The Storm of Swords. So you're not super aware of the deal with Renly's ghost here. You hear Dantos saying to Sansa that it was Renly. It was Renly. So what did that mean to you when you read that? You're like, Renly, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, I just assumed that someone was mistaken. That someone just thought that someone was Renly and wasn't. That's the only thing that I can make sense of. I guess that's all. That's as far as my mind went with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically true. It was a mistake, but it was an intentional mistake. They wanted people to think it was Renly because, if you recall, once Renly was killed, his army kind of broke apart, and it was a huge army. So a lot of them went over to the Tyrells because Loras led them, and Loras was certainly not going to switch to Stannis after what had happened, because he blames Stannis for the murder of Renly, and of course he loved Renly. And so the Tyrells got a lot of that army. And there was some fighting over it. Randall Tarley killed a bunch of Florents and sort of forcefully took over the army, but a lot of them did go to Stannis. But then when they saw this person wearing Renly's armor, they assumed he was not dead. They thought it was all just a rumor, and so that's who they had wanted to follow in the first place. So they switched back. So there's a little bit of confusion, because as Tyrion is badly wounded, and even before he's badly wounded, he sees what appears to be men fighting on the other side of the river. And he sees, it's like, Stannis' men, are they fighting each other? And it's unclear whether they are. They definitely do fight each other, but it's unclear if that's what he's seeing at that moment. Basically, the difference is that, yes, Tywin and Randall Tarley and Mace Tyrell attack the rear of Stannis' army. They're partly able to succeed in sneaking up on him because of Tyrion's wildlings, his Vale clansmen, and their killing of Stannis' scouts. That's a really important small part of this. I don't think that's in the show, but it's super important for allowing the sneaky part of the sneak attack to work. And then once that happens, you do have Stannis' men fighting each other because, like I said, some of them think they're now fighting for Renly again, so they switch away. But after that, once they start retreating, because Salador San's ships were not caught behind the chain, they start to arrive to pick up Stannis to flee. And a lot of the Florents leave as well. But then, well, Salador San doesn't have enough room for all of Stannis' soldiers. And then they do start fighting each other.
To see who gets to get on a ship to get rescued or whatever.
Right. So it's the panic. You see panic on... It's really interesting. We probably won't ever see this again. Both armies experience panic and full flight. It's not Tywin's army doesn't flee, but the City Watch does,
right.
and kill some of their own leader. They kill some. I pointed out that Jacelyn Bywater was murdered by his own men. A lot of other officers were killed by their own men too, in the book. So that's something that's really unique, is that
kill
both
the
sides
masters.
have kill the masters. Is that you have, and that's actually she's joking, but that's a great point. Is that these people don't want to be fighting. It's a perfect example of like, this is all a bunch of bull. Like, this is the High Lords fighting over the throne. That is just a silly kind of, when you really get down to it, it's a really ridiculous fight. And all these innocents are being slaughtered. All this property is being destroyed.
Ridiculous as it is history.
Yeah,
it just
you're right.
is the history of Europe.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
It's preposterous to me.
And that's something we're not even bringing up, how similar there's a ton of historical influences on this battle. Like, for example, at Con of Thrones, there was a Battle of Blackwater, historical influences, like comparing it to the Battle of Constantinople, where there was wildfire, the equivalent of a Greek fire, rather, and all these other features that are similar. But we're not even going to get into that today. That's a whole other topic. So
just remember listening to the podcast, the Daniele Bellelli podcast about Joan of Arc, and he kind of gives us the background of the 100 Years' War. It's all it is. They're just arguing about which bloodline you're following to be the king. And Bellelli loved the idea that they almost agreed on this just duel amongst kings to see what it was, but instead they decided to kill thousands of other innocent people instead of fight it out themselves,
So what we'll do here, we've got a couple more things to mention, but mostly what we're going to do is resolve those and then move on to the Con of Thrones chat. So what we might do for our next Saturday live stream is maybe we'll finish this off. If enough people have interest in it, if that's something you want to do, we can talk about the aftermath, because there's a lot of really interesting... The aftermath of the Battle of Blackwater is perhaps as interesting as the battle itself, and just all the different changes of the guard in terms of lordships and who gets executed, who gets promoted, and all the different things like that.
There were several moments, but in the scene where Tywin and the council and Joffrey are like handing out accolades, and Sansa's witnessing all this. That's I imagine for like people studying, people like connected to this. I'm trying to imagine someone reading this book when it came out.
Yeah.
15 years? I don't know how many years ago.
It came out in 98, so 21 years ago.
God. Don't say it out loud. It ends on pretty cliffhangery notes, man. It's there's a lot you have to wait to find out what's happening next for. I can't imagine what people went through back then.
Well, I mean, what I did was, I can tell you, I read it in 2000. So Storm of Swords was out, but Feast for Crows wasn't. So what I did was I was a traveling consultant. I was in Walnut Creek, California, and I finished Clash of Kings. I'm sitting in my hotel room, and I don't have a car. My coworker had rented the car because I wasn't even 25 yet. So I just looked up online. I'm like, where's the nearest Barnes and Noble? And I walked there. I was like a mile. Luckily it was only like a mile. So I walked. I just walked in there and got the next book. I was like, I got to find out what the heck happens. I was ready. I was like, I swear I was reading while I was walking. I started reading before I even got back to the hotel. So yeah, that was cool. I remember reading that and just having to know what happened and wanting to talk about the aftermath and seeing where things went from there. And then Storm of Swords just grabs you and keeps going. It's the most action-packed of all the 5 books, probably. It's kind of a climax of the first main set of arcs, and then A Feast for Crows and Dance for Dragons is kind of a reset where you get some new arcs resetting, and it's kind of like Act 2 in a lot of ways. But so let's see.
3,000-page books comprises Act 1.
So as far as non-political aftermath, as far as just people who died or were badly wounded, stuff that's more apparent, because like I said, we'll save the greater aftermath pieces for another time. Tyrion's face is horribly wounded, and his recovery is an immediate part of the end of Clash of Kings. He dreams of himself not having a mouth, which is sort of true in his dream state, with he has the plaster over it, but it's certainly makes us think about some of those theories of Tyrion not being able to speak later in his arc. Lancel is horribly wounded. His wound gets really bad.
Oh, really? That didn't happen in the book so far. I wanted to point out something about Tyrion. a couple things really.
Sure.
I imagine Martin. Like when was Martin born? Did you guys know quite when he was born?
He
how
was
old
born in
Like
the 40s, late 40s.
Like he would have known people. Like he lived through World War II in Vietnam.
He was born in 1948.
Okay, so
he didn't live through World War II,
but his family did. Like he was born in the post.
He probably would have met some people in his life scarred by war.
Oh yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
and
I mean, not even from that. I mean, think about Vietnam and other wars since
Korea,
then.
Vietnam.
You know, there's
that would have been during his
life, something. Yeah.
Right. So. Also, it made me think a bit about some parallels between Tyrion and Robert McNamara.
Okay.
Robert McNamara, who didn't want to get into Vietnam, but he was just the Secretary of Defense, so he was in charge while they were there. And he was kind of like Tyrion, doesn't want this war. He's so upset that Joffrey killed Ned, but now he's a hand. He's in charge. And people, even though he's genuinely looking out for people, he's still like the bad guy. Like the people of the city don't like him. McNamara, he had to get up in front of the press and answer all these questions about Vietnam. He was the face of it. He was not a popular character. He was like a villain to the American society. Also, McNamara developed firebombing.
Oh.
Tyrion blew up the wildfire. Like, I wonder how much Martin, even if it was subconscious, was paralleling Tyrion to McNamara.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point because he would have been in a very formative years. That's we're talking about him in his 20s and. Like he got a deferral. I forget. He got a what's the pacifist deferral to not go to war? What do they call that?
I'm not sure.
A conscientious objector.
Yeah,
that's right. He was a conscientious objector himself, so he did not go. But yeah, you're right, and it certainly affected him, whether however directly or not. That's just such a huge thing. Just the trauma of war passes down from many generations. Certainly.
Yeah.
So of course, Lancel, you'll read more about that, the details. But yeah, Lancel's wound isn't something he easily recovers from. The Hound, of course, he's not injured, but he's physically, but he's mentally traumatized badly, and then he's had enough. Like a lot of characters. He's interesting because we talked about how nobody wants to be there. Nobody wants to fight, but the Hound is special because he actually gets to leave because no one can stop him.
Yeah.
Other people are like, we aren't the Hound, so we have to stay here in this battle.
Maybe 5 or 10 people that have the ability to leave if they want because no one can stop them.
And that's really important with this scene with Sansa, which is something we hadn't talked about a whole lot. Those scenes are fairly similar. They go sort of the same way. In the end, it's not, Sansa's a little bit afraid, but she sings to him, and I don't think she sings to him in the show, does she? She just
No.
But she certainly there's a strong emotional resonance, and he is sort of he's torn. You can tell he's torn because she's the kind of person that if he were a knight, he would protect her, and he also probably reminds her of his own sister, who Gregor apparently killed. It's kind of a rumor. It's not really ever substantiated, but there was a sister and she died, and Gregor is generally blamed for it. And
I think the singing moment in the show was when she and both of them, he's coming across aggressive.
Yes.
And he just generally is, but he's maybe more so now, and she's scared. But she calms him by singing in the book. In the show, she says, "You won't hurt me." And it's hard to tell if it was an observation or a command, but he doesn't hurt her.
Yeah, he's right.
He kind of recognizes that she's right, that he won't. Yeah.
I think of it as an observation, and I kind of think it's a lot more meaningful for her to say something.
Yeah,
to
it's
him
very
there,
brave. Yeah,
rather than just sing him a song, which is its own meaning. But I like the show version more. I think.
Yeah, I think there's a good case to be made. Yeah, because it's such an emotional moment, and the acting. When you have an emotional moment and the acting is really good, that's just something that it's difficult for a book to match acting.
Yeah.
George is amazing with his words, but it's human facial features when done right are just.
And there's other things that add to
more,
other filmmaking aspects add to it too, like the edit from his face to her face.
Yeah.
The music the tone of the music that can hit at the moment. Those are also things that can add. The show maybe can't. Martin gets to say exactly what Sansa's thinking, but he doesn't say exactly what Sandor's thinking.
Right.
But Rory McCain, is that his name? He can.
McCain, yeah.
He can convey it. The music and editing can convey it. So.
And you see also that there's a slight difference in why Sansa goes to her room. In the show, it's Shay saying you got to go. Like they're if they're breaking through the walls, you're in big danger. You got to go bar your door. And in the book, it's Dantos telling her the same thing. And then Dantos, who finds her afterwards and tells her the result, and that they've won. They've won. So Sansa's not even sure who she wants to win.
Cersei calls her on that too. She's like, I forgot
well, she
what
says
it was.
she says
for
the prayer.
Victory of who, or something like
She's
that.
like, no, I pray for it's like I keep you in my thoughts just like Joffrey or whatever she says. It's like I pray just like I prayed for Joffrey. And it's like, wait.
She said that to Tyrion.
Yeah.
She said that
yeah,
one
and
to
Tyrion's
Tyrion. She was like, wait a minute.
Her wordplay is so good there, yeah. Okay, so a couple other things about like people who died, and then we'll talk about some Con of Thrones stuff. So in the show, it's Mathos who dies, Davos' son. But in the books, it's 4 of Davos' sons, which is really harsh. There's Emery Florent dies, even though he's not killed in the wildfire blow up. He does die. A key commander for Stannis' ground forces is Sir Guyard Morrigan, and he's not super important, but he was one of Renly's Rainbow Guard, so it was that's kind of important. He was the green, so he's a green. He was the Guyard the green, and he ends up fighting the guy in Renly's armor who is green.
Oh.
So it's a green battle, and Garland wins that one. And then of course Sir Mandon Moore is killed in both very similar ways by Podrick in both book and show. Jacelyn Bywater we talked about. He's Iron Hand, and he kind of predicts his own death, and there's fallout for that. And that's basically it. There's a lot of random characters killed, smaller minor characters, but as far as named characters who die, that's basically it as far as the ones we've named. A couple more questions here. We have Maura Lee for Ashea. Thank you, Maura, for that. And from Jennifer Shanley Clark. This is for Ashea to get a drink after the stream for dealing with all the tech stuff today. Boy, we should have tech problems more often. No, not more. No, just kidding. Just kidding. We definitely should not. Abort Consciousness says maybe she was saying it to herself, maybe to assure herself. And I think that's in reference to Sansa.
You want
bolstering her own confidence. Yeah. It's a
She has to believe it.
Yeah. Definitely. So unless you have any final thoughts on the battle, as I said, we could pick it up another time, talk about the aftermath maybe a month from now. But let's see.
I don't think I will ever have final thoughts on the battle. Last minute thoughts.
Well said. Any other things you want to squeeze in right now?
Yeah, I think I started to say it earlier that there's so much I think I got distracted with thinking about how much it left dangling and cliffhangery type moments. But the other thought I had was I understand why forums exist, why all the proliferation of the fandom, because there's so much to think about when there's scrolling through the names of the different ships and their captains, and
there's something
they all
in there.
have stories, they're all connected, they're going to come into play somehow, when Dany's thinking about the different threes. By the way, I started reading Duncan Egg also. Yeah. And so when he keeps at the tournament, he's going through all the heraldry and everything, and there's so much richness to that. Not only does it give you these neat images, but I imagine it's a good tool for George. It allows him to foster his garden.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And you're right. For example, Davos' ship is called Black Betha, and Black Betha was married to Aegon V, the Unlikely, who is Dany's great grandfather. So it's kind of neat. Just those little stories like that. That's just a perfect example of something we didn't really have time for. Oh, I guess I squeezed it in. But there's more to it. There's more about Black Betha. And we'll be discussing her more in our Blackwood episode coming up. That's a good time for that.
You don't know anything else about Duncan Egg, right, Sean?
I've read about the first half of the first book.
But you didn't know anything else much going into it.
I know that he's related to Brienne, right? I think, right?
And you know that about Duncan.
I know there's a story about some of it's juxtaposed in my mind, the names, the characters, and everything. But I know that he's a prince.
That he's a prince.
Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't know if you knew.
Some of that I didn't know I was piecing it together.
Became king.
Yeah.
For example, that was kind of what I was getting at, without wanting to spoil you, that he becomes actual king.
I did know that, but I suspect even if I didn't, with all the other things I do know, I might have pieced that together by now.
Okay.
Right. Cool. All right, some shout outs to Patreon supporters who keep the show running. We are super grateful to you all who have supported us on Patreon. It is life for us. This enables us to do all the episodes that we do. Thanks to Vorsaki, wielder of a Valyrian steel arak with the dragonbone hilt. Kookoi, called Sunpiercer, wielder of a dragonbone bow. And Kakavo the Tamer, wielder of the wildfire whip Gehenna. Also thanks to our Queens of Love and Beauty from the depths of Fleabottom, Lord Ken of House Hammer has declared for Queen Carrie, Fire of the North, who recovered Dark Sister from beyond the wall. And a laurel of glory in the name of love to Bud of House Beresford, Knight of Tolkien and Arbiter of Scotch from Sandy the Dragon, Blood of Queen Daenerys, and Lady of Jameson. Little alcohol wars there. You got Jameson versus the Arbiter of Scotch. So that's cool. And of
friendly
course,
rivalry.
A friendly rivalry. Yes, they are married, so you'd hope it's a friendly rivalry. Sounds like a lovely couple. And our Ironborn captains get a shout out this time. How about Black Matos Stormrider, captain of the Rusted Hinge, who we hung out with at Con of Thrones and generally hang out with a lot of cons. He's an excellent con attendee. Our good buddy Matt McSorley. Sir Selvus Redblade of White Harbor is
There's
captain.
something else about Matt McSorley.
Something else, huh?
Oh, is it his birthday today, right?
No, but we're going to Ireland.
And he's going to be there.
No.
Yeah, we're staying with him for part of our trip. I
Heck
mean, not
yeah,
with him. We're
that's
getting
right.
an Airbnb together.
The community
I could
is
be wrong, but
strong.
I think his birthday was soon, if not today, or recent, or whatever.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think it was. Well,
really?
happy birthday, Matt. Black Matos Stormrider.
He's like, it's not for 6 months.
Well, I'll take it.
Maybe I'm misremembering.
Send gifts. So Sir Selvus Redblade of White Harbor, captain of Trident of the North, is next up. Then Lord Chuck Laws, captain of the Droman Nightblood, destroyer of evil. Hey, Chuck, how you doing? John Gregor, captain of the Fist of the Drowned God. Sir Kieran of Lonely Light is Scourge of the Sunset Sea, captain of Naga's Breath, a Droman armed with siphons of wildfire. Perfect. Even though the Ironborn were nowhere near this battle, that ship would have been useful.
What about Naga's breasts?
Naga's breasts. I don't know anything about Naga's breasts. No comment. Eileen is Archer Queen, captain of the Border Collie. Crimson Kate is captain of the Drowned Queen's Vengeance. Jasana the Just is collector of tolls, captain of the Golden Gift. Lord Mitch of House Bailey is captain of Widow's Blood. His heir is Lordling Mason of House Bailey. Beneath the Gold is a podcast focusing on lesser-known A Song of Ice and Fire characters. And Prakash, the Lord Protector of the Gallifreyans, is captain of the TARDIS of the Seven Seas. Obvious Doctor Who reference there. Very nice. And that is it for the shout-outs. Thank you all again for supporting History of Westeros. If you are so inclined, you can check out our other episodes on either Acast or YouTube. And we are, of course, in the midst of Valar Rereadus. Episode 7 is coming up on Sunday. That involves Ned's fever dream at the Tower of Joy. That talks about Tyrion's story with Tysha. There's always huge things happening, no matter what section of the book we're dealing with at that time. There are no lulls, especially when you're doing 7 chapters at a time.
So are we going to go to the con talk
Yeah, let's
now?
talk about the con.
Because I have a good segue. As we read our supporters there,
Yeah.
you get to meet a lot of them at the
Yeah,
con. And I
yeah.
got a good picture with my Lord Commander and my hand.
Heck
I
yeah.
posted it on Facebook last night, a bunch of pictures.
Right on.
And I think Shay has got some pictures.
Yeah,
to
I've got
post
one
too.
good. Here's one good picture that has a bunch of our, listeners and mods here as dragons, like Laura Boros
Yeah.
and some others. There's 4 of them in their dragon group, as you can see there, which is awesome. And
Dragon
they're
has
cute.
4 heads.
Yeah,
Mhm.
4 heads, but yeah, they each had a different color and matching leggings, and it was just super cute. I loved it.
So big. Was that all you had for that?
Well, just
We have more
just
images.
one of the overarching things to talk about at cons is the people you get to meet. A lot of
Yes.
these personalities you know online vaguely. All of a sudden, you meet them in person, and you go to a panel together, get drunk together, take some
Yeah.
pictures together. It's
Here's
a
another
really great bonding
example is Mandy, who's in our chat right now. Of course, she did an amazing werewood cosplay that I have on the
yeah.
screen right now. Me
Heck yeah.
and Mandy, a picture of us together, and then a picture from behind, including her with Stephanie Vale, I believe. And so that's beautiful werewood work. I loved it. One of my favorite cosplays of the weekend, personally.
Oh, and look, we have San Rixian's in the chat along with Amanda,
Yeah.
the Disputed Lands.
Yes.
The chat is bumping, y'all.
Yeah, San Rixian had a great Arya cosplay too,
Oh,
I must
yeah,
say.
she
'Cause
did.
She just looks so much like Maisie Williams, so it's pretty perfect, I think.
That's true. That is true. It really helps when you when you have the look already.
Sean had a great picture opportunity with an actor. I got a
Yeah,
picture
yeah.
of it here.
Let's talk about that. Speaking of characters who were in the Battle of Blackwater,
Yeah.
it's definitely one of the fun things about the
Excuse
con, and as we get invited as special guests, and so we get to a little extra access to some of the other fun special guests like actors.
there was a moment when we were at a lunch, and Jerome Flynn had to walk by me to get to the food, and I like lean over to Shay because I'm wearing his shirt, like I have the Bronn shirt on, and I like lean over to Shay and read it. And I'm like, hey, how aggressive should I interrupt them? And Shay just like stands up. Hey, Jerome, this is one of your biggest fans right here. I didn't even finish my sentence, and she's like introducing us, and I'm like, I show the shirt, and he looks at it. And I'm like, I don't want to interrupt your meal, but I can't miss this opportunity. He's like, yeah, he comes over, takes my shoulder. I didn't even want to fumble around with my phone, so thanks to Rita for like snapping the shot there.
My thoughts there were that he was standing in line to get his food.
He had to wait anyway.
I was like, no, well, he was about to get it all. I was like, you don't want to ask him when he's grabbed
after
his
he's already
food
got his hands
and
full and
eat,
plate.
and
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
This is our chance. Otherwise, we have to wait around for him to finish, and it's awkward.
Favorite fortune's the bold.
Yeah, favorite fortune's the bold. I figured
Favorite
I
fortune's the
figured
bold.
You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
I said the same damn.
We're talking like Yoda today. Like Yoda we talk.
But no, I figured I'd take the hit towards being embarrassing. Like maybe you were slightly embarrassed, but I was
So-
the one that was like, hey.
So the next day.
Well, hang on. I got
Okay,
a
all
Bronn
right, go
story
ahead.
too.
All right,
So,
yeah.
so I was sitting back in there in between panels. I go back to get a coffee. It's a endless fount of coffee, so of course I'm going to hang out near that. And I'm the only one in the room. And Jerome just walks in. He's just been on stage or something. He walks in. He's got like two of his entourage with him, his assistant and somebody else. And I'm the only other one in the room. So just to not make it weird, I guess he walks up to me and is like, "Hey, I'm Jerome." And I'm like, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm Aziz, big fan. So that was neat. It's not like he knew who I was. He's not like, hey, I have to meet you, Aziz. No, but he just to be polite. So he was a cool guy.
I really liked that story you guys told me about Jaime.
Oh yeah, Jaime. Okay, so I'm sitting there. You have a Jaime story too, but
Yeah.
I'll do mine first, I guess. So I'm sitting there at a table, again in the hospitality suite, and it's me and Jason Concepcion and Mallory Rubin of The Ringer and Binge Mode. And I think Dave Gonzalez from Storm of Spoilers. Maybe there was one other person at the table, but I forget. It's all a blur. And it's the same situation where Nikolaj has to walk past us to get his food. And definitely no one's interrupting him because he's with his 2 daughters and his wife. So we're definitely not going to be like, oh, hey, Nikolaj, blah, blah, blah. But we're all, of course, like looking at him, like stealing a glance, like, oh, there he is. He's getting
Checking
his food.
out his butt.
Yeah. And so he gets his food, walks past us. And then after he walks past us, he turns around and looks at us. And we're all like, he's going to talk to us. And he says, I'm surprised they don't have, and he pauses, he has to think about it for a second, lemon cakes here, to eat. And we're all just like, we all just like melt. And then he gets back to his table, and then Mallory leans down with the that quiet whisper thing, that people can do. And she goes, he talked to us. And I'm like, Mallory, you're like super famous too. So this is really, so that was really neat.
For me, when you told me that, I was just like, wow, he knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For my story, the next day, I had a shirt on that if you know Game of Thrones, you still might not even recognize what this is. I'll wear this shirt next stream, maybe. It's just this
It's
silhouetted
just really
image.
small, Sean,
right?
on the shirt,
it's small,
too.
and it's like a silhouetted image of when Brienne is leading Jaime, like on a rope.
In the rope, yeah.
It's just an image of 2 figures that maybe you can kind of tell she has a sword, and a rope between. You can barely tell that it's human figures or whatever. But once you know what that image is, okay, you clearly know what it is. And so I see Nickelodeon, Walmart, Costco, and I'm a little bolder because the day before had gone well. So I'm like, Nikolaj, I hate to interrupt you. And he turns and is like, oh, he's kind of like pleasant to like interact with me. Comes up like, I think he's coming up to shake my hand, but I ruin it because I like point at my shirt. I'm like, I just wanted to show you this cool shirt. And he kind of stops, kind of squints and looks in. And suddenly he like lights up. Oh, with Brienne, yes, on the road, yes.
Didn't he say season 3? Didn't
Yeah, I
he
think he
name...
said season 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he and I'm like, I'm like positive interaction with Jaime, And so then he reaches out and shakes my hand. And he's like, where'd you get that? And I'm like, T Fury, I think. Redbubble, one of those, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it was well spread around the con. It was one of the buzz items of the con how amazing Nikolaj was with people. He's just the most personable. Like, there's a line in The Office where James Spader is in a moment that you would think would be uncomfortable, and they're like, "I'm sorry, are we making you uncomfortable?" And he says, "I'm never uncomfortable." And I imagine that about Nikolaj, because he seems like nothing. He was just so cool with everyone. People are like, "Oh my God, Nikolaj, blah, blah, blah." Like, not women only, men and women are just like, "Oh my God, Nikolaj." And he's just like, "Get in here," giving people hugs, holding their hands in their cheeks, like doing the like gazing into their eyes thing. Just
he was a good sport with the pictures.
Yeah,
if you're on social media, you've probably seen some of it. If not, you're missing out. But like, there's like cosplayers as Cersei and Tywin, and he's like holding Cersei, looking at Tywin, like, because Tywin has this sign that says paternity test. And he's like,
he was such a good sport. He
played with
dominated,
props and
he ran the con. I swear, like he made it so much better because so many people showed up for him. Like, he was a huge part of the draw. Jerome was awesome too, but Nikolaj was probably the bigger star. And people just were raving about how great he was just to talk to and in his panels and just to run into. So big props to him.
Someone else who was also a fun guest at the con. He's not quite as big and famous as Jaime, but Miltos, Serial.
Yeah, he's the regular now, right?
And we interviewed him last year, and that was one of the most fun experiences of my life. Seriously, literally.
Yes.
And he this year, Rita. Like, oh man, it's super limited, but he gives sword fighting lessons. He does water dancing lessons at the con.
They're really popular.
Yeah, and it sold out in like 7 minutes, and it happened last year. And so Rita was like on her phone, just refresh to make sure to get them. This is like on my actual birthday. She got these tickets so that we got to do it. And he remembered me from the interview last year, and that was fun. And it was actually a really neat, like, I don't know, course. It was he was really clever, like how he taught it and the little things you learned. Like
he's probably gotten better at it.
I'm sure, yeah. He's a good instructor, but he's very charismatic. It was a whole. I don't want to get too much into that one thing, but I could probably do a whole talk for a whole hour just about that thing.
Miltos was.
Yeah, it was a couple hours long. The whole thing. It was.
Did you get to see him at all, Aziz?
I saw him briefly in the hospitality suite.
Okay.
I didn't really get to talk to him though.
Yeah,
it's just the con was just such a blur. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw him in the hospitality suite as well, and he entered from the back of it. He must have like been coming from a panel or something, right? And so like I turned around right then, and he saw me, and his eyes like lit up, and he was like, "Hey!" And like we gave each other a big hug and talked for a minute, and I was like, "Wow, what a nice guy." I was just like very happy that he just was very kind.
Whoa, comment from Joe Magician. Hey, Matt, how you doing, buddy? Check out Joe Magician's channel. Great stuff over there. He says, the coolest thing I saw he did was that Oz from Watchers had to miss a family wedding to be at the con, and Nikolaj recorded a video apologizing to the bride and groom for Oz not making it.
Wow.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's awesome. Really cool. And speaking of Watchers in the Wall, shout out to Watchers. Their coverage leading up to the con and during was fantastic. We got a lot more extra photos because of them, and just interacting with all the Watcher people is super fun. We did Shea ran game night with a little help from me, and it was perfect. We did Quiplash and there was also Family Feud. We didn't run that, but we were back there for it.
Sean played Family
Sean did
Feud,
play Family
with
Feud.
the Wolf and
With
the
the
Crows.
Wolf and the Crows.
Which
Another
are-
highlight of the
yes.
con was the Wolf and the Crows.
Yep.
You can
From
tell
the Last
they're a
Watch
highlight because
documentary.
we're all talking over each other at once.
Yeah, we can. We're so excited.
They did several panels, and Andrew McClay, like, clearly he's very talkative and extroverted and outgoing and
Really funny.
a good sense of humor and timing, and has great stories. And then, so, Steve Love, who also got a part on it, he's a comedian, and he had a small part on Game of Thrones also, and he does a lot of hosting at Con of Thrones. He's usually the face of whatever's happening on stage.
There's a lot of the emceeing,
Yeah. And he's great fun. He's awesome.
Well,
And-
he's got competition now.
Yeah, that's right. But he's announcing the teams for the Family Feud, and it was Mallory was also in this competition, by the way. And when they read off the different names, the Wolf and the Crows are split up, and they just, what? You can't split up. Blah, 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 blah. But Steve Love's like, look, man, I didn't make the rules. I'm just delivering the news. And they kind of, accept it, and suddenly like, screw the Wolf, screw the Crows. You're going down, Crow.
That's really good.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. It was really exciting, and it was a fun. That whole Family Feud is fun to have, like, team of people who all love the show, an audience of people who all love the show, and the host loves the show. Like everyone was all about
But whoever
it.
surveyed it, I mean, whoever was surveyed does not know that show.
Yeah,
Sometimes
it was,
you think it can be very frustrating.
Andy McClay even said, "I want to say to those of you who took the survey, what are you smoking?"
See, the thing is that this is the one Family Feud show where yelling "Show me dragon" it would be accurate potentially.
Show me dragon. Good
But
point.
Andy McClay and The Wolf and the Crows definitely were a huge highlight for me. I got a chance, I talked for a long time with Andy about, the con, and we're going to Ireland next month. So I was talking his year off, and yeah, he was just incredibly friendly, and he's single, ladies. he wanted me to tell people, as it so happens. So why not tell everyone here?
Those guys were so fun. Yeah, they were a huge draw, and the fandom really gets to pat itself on the back for rising to the occasion. There were a last minute addition to the con. I believe Mischief paid a portion of the.
A little bit, but it was
Mostly
after
it was
the
the
Con of
convention, yeah.
It was
The
after the
people.
Con of
I mean,
Thrones
yeah.
group
Like
that
a
did a
fundraiser was
fundraiser.
started to get them there. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's like $7,500 were raised. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was a pretty significant amount. So big shout out to the fandom,
Yeah.
especially Gina Miller and the rest of the Geek Chat one, and
Speaking of-
after the con. After the con group on Facebook.
Yeah, after the Con of Thrones, you can find it. But speaking of Gina Miller, we've got something that people watching earlier might have seen while I was trying to fix our audio, which is Lil Bear.
Gina's daughter.
Yeah, you can see a picture and a video as he's taking her with
So this is funny, a little extra story here. I just was walking in the hall, was lucky enough to see this happen. Wyndham Tormund, who had just given her this dagger, this foam dragon glass dagger. By the way, there's lots of shots of Little Bear, Lyanna Mormont, stabbing 1-1 in the eye.
Yeah.
Because there's a 1-1 cosplayer there, and so everybody wanted to see that
You guys
badly.
you guys can see the 1-1 cosplayer
Yeah.
here in this picture of Sean's that has Tormund and Bronn as well.
Mm-hmm.
Bronn is that is Bronn, right? He's doing his Bronn.
I thought it was John, but
Oh,
I'm
you're
not
right.
sure.
Well, Tom Hooper, he does
Yeah,
both
I think
Bronn
that was
and
Bronn,
Tom and John. I think that's him and his John looking at the sword. Actually, he does both though. He's a great cosplayer. Tom,
there's
he goes by Tom Snow.
Tom Snow, and there's of course also a Con Snow, and Con Snow had one of the best photos of the entire weekend, which was it's something everybody wanted for season 8, and it was a picture. They had wolves there. Wolves were part of the con, and you could get your pictures with wolves. And one of the wolves was pure white. And there's the con got a photo or a short video of this white wolf licking Con Snow's face. And Con
He
Snow
looks
looks
just like
exactly
Jon
like
Snow.
Jon Snow. It's incredible. And
It's like
Shout out to
cheating
Con Snow.
as
It's
far
cheating,
as cosplaying goes.
Yeah,
It's not
it's-
fair. You just look like John.
it's
You just
so
look like Kit Harington.
it's incredible. And so that video, it's like a 3-second video of this ghost licking Con Snow's face, and he's just got this big grin on his face because why wouldn't you? And it's so good.
I know he also had a great story because he ran into Nikolaj and he
Yes.
was like, "Whoa, you look just like Kit," and like got a picture and all that.
Yeah,
cool.
Zach is his real name, Zach Con Snow. And
Yeah.
he says that his photo with Nikolaj is Nikolaj actually making a face, pointing at him like, what the hell? Like he looks exactly, no, seriously, he looks like Kit. Like, what's going on here? Yeah, that's so good.
We got some other good pictures here to share though.
Ooh, real quick shout out to Will Carter, who
Oh, yeah.
local Nashville guy, big fan of our channel and several of the other YouTube channels, and he was very generous, put us up in an Airbnb along with some other folks, and that made our trip so much better. Very welcoming. He had so much to tell us about Nashville, great stories, and helped throw some really good parties that made the weekend even better. So thanks a lot, Will. Appreciate that, buddy.
Yeah.
Next up here, this is a photo I got of the Great Bastards
How
group.
cool is that? The actual Great Bastards. I mean, come on. How cool is that?
Yeah, right here.
And the detail.
Yeah, right here you have Brian Eidolon, who you'll recognize from our chats and all the questions he submits, and he did Westeros, an American musical.
Yeah, check
Just
that out if you
saying.
haven't.
And then you've got Christina Triple there, who obviously is also in our chats, and who we're going to Ireland with next month as
Yeah.
Sierra Seastar.
Shout out to Blood of the Podcast.
Yes,
Her show.
yes.
And she got the green eye and the blue eye contact with the green eye,
And her
the green and
necklace.
blue necklace.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a
perfect.
fantastic Sierra.
And then you've got Michael G as Blood Raven. He's also in Westeros, an American musical. And Josh Harrison, who has an Iron Throne he's Doppelraver cosplay. And he's got an Iron Throne he's created as Aegon the Unworthy.
So he actually have not just a great bastard, but Aegon the Unworthy, the dad there.
and they created a rap for it, a Great Bastards rap, and they're editing the video for it right now.
Oh.
So
we will certainly let you know when that's out.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, I love them all. They're great.
So
No, Christina in particular has like 4 Game of Thrones raps right now. And she's writing a Lannister one, and she just knows them off the top of her head.
She had
I don't know.
a cosplay as the
she's
Long
drunk.
Night.
Yeah, she dressed up as the Long
That was
Night.
awesome.
Yeah, and she did a Viserion bunny hutch. Anyways, I think she's great. I'm excited. We'll have her on at some point for sure.
Yeah.
On a live stream. I would be excited for that. But for the immediate future, Ireland.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to share that picture. Sean got this picture of an Arya that people saw earlier.
Arya with the actual clams and cockles.
Yeah.
The actual wheelbarrow. Cool.
I think
There's-
that's such a fun thing.
So it's a good point here because Arya's had a lot of looks over the years, right? 8 seasons of Arya, you got a lot of versions of Arya, but that's nothing next to Sansa. Let's talk about different looks, Daenerys too, but Sansa was maybe the cosplay hit in terms of quantity. Most people playing Sansa, and what's so amazing about it is there were so many Sansas and almost no overlaps.
Yeah,
like there were like 20 Sansas and none of them were the same Sansa.
I completely disagree.
Oh, there were a lot of overlaps?
I think most of the Sansas were the chained dark Sansa.
Really? I thought there were
that
so
was
many.
the one I saw like
Okay.
100% the most of, and I was like, one I saw was early season, like pink dress Sansa.
Yeah.
And like I saw like 1 or 2 like light colored dress Sansas.
There was a
and
wedding
all-
dress Sansa.
Yeah,
that's
that's Megan.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like she did it, and
I don't know. I feel like they were more than that, but I'm not disagreeing with you that they were duplicates. I guess I could just be wrong about that.
I
But
mean,
I felt like there were
feel
so
like
many
I
versions.
saw for sure 15 or 20 just of the.
Yeah, well, I'm not disagreeing with you
Yeah.
on that. I just didn't see
Yes.
that. But there definitely was a wide variety. But apparently there were more duplicates. Than I
Whereas
thought.
Arya got like people doing multiple different, cosplay.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
like,
there were lots of
different-
Aryas too. Yeah.
Different types of Aryas.
There were even multiple Torments, as we saw. And of course, multiple Daenerys. There's always multiple Daenerys. One of the really excellent ones, though, too, this is a really creative version, was the Wildfire Marjorie.
Oh yeah,
That
here we
was
go. I've
super
got that
cool.
on screen now.
So, San Rixie in Super Chat says, shout out to the Blackwater Bay, which is not directly related. It is Wildfire Marjorie, but it does make us think of wildfire.
Hmm. Also, a very creative cosplay was the opening credits by Annalise Rose, who's
Yes,
done other amazing cosplay in the past. But I really love this one. I mean, I love maps and all that, but it's just incredibly creative.
Yeah. Someone else dressed up as Belly Robert with his belly sticking
Oh
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was a real big hit. There was a
The comet. Someone
with
had
the
a red dress.
comet.
that
Oh,
thing.
that was Wendy Vaccaro.
Wendy Vaccaro. We don't know
I don't know how to
last name,
say
yeah.
it, but yeah, she was also a Roz bunny, while her husband Christopher, he was a green man.
Ooh,
So
Green
that's
Man.
pretty cool.
That is very cool.
A Green Man or the Green Man.
Just
yeah,
a Green Man. I
a
agree.
green man.
Monster super chat from Tommy Pappas. Thank you very much, my friend. We got to see you there and hang out. Tommy was
So
there.
briefly, I was
I
so
know.
bummed. I really thought I was gonna get more time to hang out with him, and the con was so spread out at the different hotels.
Yeah.
There's always so many people that I want to spend time with, but this happened a lot this year in particular, both because the con has gotten bigger, we know
Yes.
more people, and it was more spread out.
We haven't heard final numbers, but my impression was from hearing rumors was that it was potentially as large as the first 2 Con of Thrones combined.
Yeah, I thought it was
Whoa,
like
really?
more like
Mhm.
5 to
Wow.
8K.
Yeah, it was a lot. They sold a lot of tickets for it, and that's a great sign. It's not ending. If anyone was wondering, there will be a Con of Thrones next year. They don't know where it's going to be. There's a rumor that I heard directly from Melissa, who's the CEO of Mischief, that it'll be Denver, but that is just an idea at this point. So we can hope it'll be Denver, but it's a long shot from being settled. But what's
Gotta email
99%
them.
certain is that it's happening.
Email, comment,
Yeah,
tweet at them.
tell them you like that.
Yeah,
Denver.
petition for Denver. Yeah.
Sean and Rita like that idea because Rita is in Denver and Sean goes to Denver.
Yeah.
Yes. So another fun thing was there was karaoke. They always do karaoke, and there's some really amazing song choices. We got a redo of Pete Easy. Shout out to Pete Easy doing Acapella Rains of Castamere, which he kicked off last year with the same thing and did it this year. So it's kind of becoming a thing that we start with Pete. I hope that tradition continues. He's got a great voice. It takes a lot of bravery to get up there and sing acapella. Speaking of
him too, also I got an ashtray, a werewood stump ashtray from him.
Oh, very nice. Yeah,
have to
Pete was
mention
walking
that.
around with his own art that he did, his shirt art. He did some really cool designs. Great stuff. Check out his store. I don't know. I wish I had the address, but I don't. We'll have to look that up for y'all later. Also, there was a singer who dressed up as black armor, shoulder pads Cersei, who sang "All That She Wants Is Another Baby," which is just so perfect.
Which I think didn't Nickelodeon, Walmart, Costco tweet that? I think Kim Renfro tweeted it, and he tweeted that too, Gwendolyn Christie, saying, "Hey, you should go to Con of Thrones next year."
That's right.
That would be an awesome.
I liked Tormund doing a wild thing.
Yes, wild thing. That's right.
It's wilding, obviously.
And Petra, I assume you're going to mention.
Yes, that was the other acapella that just talk about. Okay, so you got a room of raucous congoers who were drinking, singing karaoke. It's a giant room, and Petra Halber gets up there and says, "Down in the hall," and then everybody's like, quiet.
Hushed. Yeah.
Acapella, Jenny's song. We're like, oh, and it was beautiful. There were tears. It was so good. She sang the whole thing, the long extended version. And it just keeps raising the bar because we raced our Patreon milestone a while back for me to do Jenny's song, and then we fell back under it, and then we got back to it. So I am working on it, but the bar is raised really high. I'm gonna have to really bring my A game, my A+ game, because I already was gonna bring my A game because that's how we roll. But the bar is raised. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, it was super fun. Karaoke was great. But before karaoke was the costume contest, and the costume contest was so good. People put so much effort into the costumes, and I swear there were like 100 good costumes that weren't even in the contest because of, some people didn't want to wear their costume all day long. Some people wanted to switch because they had multiple costumes. Some people just don't care about competing or don't want to be on stage.
I think, by the way, this is a thing that I learned. Apparently, the difference between costume and cosplay, I'm not quite sure if this is true, but this is a thing I learned this weekend, is that you make your own cosplay. Now, I don't know how much, or what percent, or
for
if you
example,
have to smelt the metal
for
or
the
buckles.
cosplay
But
contest, you have to have made at least 75% to be eligible for the cosplay contest.
So it's still very impressive to see a lot of the costumes that might not have been eligible for the contest.
Right, because they were purchased. But people still put money into it, which is a thing.
And sometimes they're putting money into, okay, I'm going to buy this crown from here. I'm going to buy this gown and I'm going to modify it in such and stuff
put
way.
this jewel or this signet
they're doing lots of creative
sew it onto
things,
this cloth or whatever.
But it's not quite, they're not making it, and sometimes it isn't from scratch. They're not, weaving the thread.
Yeah.
Like there's
but some of them are, like.
Well, I mean, like at the certain point, like they're not creating.
They're not spinning the wool. They're not smelting the metal of the buckles.
There's a certain point where you're like, okay, we don't require you to do this.
Some people do even that. Like
I suppose so. Yeah.
The cosplay, the person who won had supposedly put, like she said, 6 months, 5 hours a day into her costume.
She created 2 costumes.
Yeah, it's true. She did 2 costumes.
Yeah, but like thousands of pieces that
she said it was like hand cut by X-Acto.
Yeah, like layers of ribbons or whatever that came down that were thousands of pieces that had to be cut and then put together.
Yeah.
Just the effort.
And that's just like the chess piece,
Yeah. So when you go to an event like this, you know that you're going to see, you don't exactly know which costumes, but you're going to see costumes that people put astounding amounts of effort into and thought and love into. And I just
effort through the day wearing it. It's like
my
hot. It's like all this clunky stuff you're wearing. You kind of ruin it if you're carrying around your backpack or whatever, you know what I mean? You have to really join it,
Yeah.
Sacrifice comfort for canon.
Yeah, and of course, at this convention, it was a little bit extra of a sacrifice because the hotel was not in the same spot as the convention itself. So you don't have to be outside too much, but it was Nashville in July. So even being outside for a few minutes is pretty brutal if it's during the day.
Wool coat, your 3 layers of armor and boots.
Yeah, so it's extra effort. There's effort in the wearing of the costume, not just in the making of it. So a couple funny thing happened. Funny thing happened on the way to the costume contest. We're waiting there for it to happen. It's getting ready to start. People are just milling around, having some drinks. It's the end of all the panels, so people are waiting for there's like a little bit of I wouldn't call it a lull, but the costume contest hasn't started yet. So I look down at my phone. I see a message, a Twitter message. I'm like, Twitter message. Don't see a lot of direct Twitter messages. Look there, and it's a message from Alt-Shift-X. He's like, oh, hey, Aziz, I'm in town for Con of Thrones. Are you around? I'm like, what? That was so cool. He didn't tell anyone he was coming. He just showed up. And that's just Alt-Shift-X style, right? He's incognito. He puts out the amazing content, but keeps his personality pretty hidden. Everybody knows his accent, of course.
He's really nice.
He's super nice.
He has really interesting. I don't know. I actually was I'm surprised we had a lot in common, and I enjoyed talking to him a lot. And yeah, he was he literally he came over to our Airbnb and he did our dishes. Like he just did the dishes, and we were like, you don't need to do that. And he's like, I've been traveling for so long, it feels good to do a chore. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll believe you.
I was happy that he knew me. Like when you introduced us, it's like, hello, Sean. I'm like, hello, you know me. Like, and at one point, he went to one of the parties at night. And I felt like I was just talking too much. I wasn't exactly sober, and I felt like I was talking, and I like cut myself off. And it's like,
hard for me to imagine you drunk, Sean. Like I know I've seen you drink, but
drunk,
like,
but you
I don't know. But
you don't really change that much. You're not really that different when you've had a few drinks.
I feel different.
You feel self-conscious that you're talking
I feel
too
self-conscious
much.
that I'm talking too
much all the time.
Yeah, I guess
Sean.
so.
Most people become oblivious when they drink. You're becoming more aware.
Yeah. But I cut myself off. I was like, I'm not talking too much. He's like, no. I'm asking questions. Like, okay, it made me feel better. Like,
yeah, right. And that's one of the joys for us as YouTubers, podcasters, is talking to other YouTubers and podcasters. It's like we get to talk shop. We don't have like coworkers that we get to talk to on a regular basis about what we do for a living, and or just spend a lot of time on. And yeah, so that was really fun. He's super cool guy, and I lived vicariously through the introductions. I would walk up, I would be like, hey, who do you want to meet? You know, because nobody recognizes him. They might recognize his voice if they heard him talking, but just by sight, no one knows who he is.
I think they would. That's very likely that they would be able to, considering people have recognized our voices.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So yeah, I think it would happen to him on occasion.
Definitely. There's not a lot of Australian people around in general. It's not an. It's
I think if I knew
accent.
that he was there and then met him, I'd be like, oh, you're him, you know. But just in the blind meeting him, yeah.
And so I had the first person I introduced him to was Kim Renfro. She walks by, and so this is what I did to like 12 or 15 different people. I'd introduce him by name and then say, also known as Alt-Shift-X, while they're shaking hands, so I could see their reaction. They would just like, inevitably, like the eyes would go up, or they would jump, or have some sort of physical reaction, be like, no way. Tony Teflon was the funniest, because he was like, I don't believe it. He was playful, but he was like, I don't believe, it's not really Alt-Shift-X. You're not really Alt-Shift-X. He was quizzing him on his own stuff. He's like, all right, so-called Alt-Shift-X. What was your how many views does your top video have? And he's like, I don't know, 5 million? And he goes, wrong, 6.6, very suspicious. Then he says,
as if you would just know.
Yeah, and he says, what was the last video you released? And he named that one correctly. He's like, okay, you got that one right.
Story checks out.
But Kim Renfro was like, oh, and she jumped, and he goes, I read your articles on Insider. You're a great writer. And she was like, bah.
Yeah.
Like, you know who I am, you know. And that happened like 12 times. People, because he would just know their stuff. He's just in the community.
You have to spend your time keeping up with that stuff. You know, that's a lot of material out there, a lot of insights to gain and share in the community, you know.
So that was just wonderful. That was another wonderful surprise that no one saw coming that made the convention even better. And I don't know, we're running out of time. We have more stories, but we're going to have to cut it short pretty soon here. Do you have any other really important stories that we didn't talk about too much at the parties? We didn't talk about.
I don't actually have much else to talk. I feel like I covered a lot of stories from the con myself. Other things we've talked about in general, the panels, like they'll be released. I don't feel like I need to pump them up. We'll release them.
The panels, you're right. We do have a lot to say about the panels, but you're right. We're covering that separately. There were a lot of other really good panels. I will say that the paneling was a lot more active. The Con of Thrones panels have always been really good. But there was, because of the extended ticket sales, there were more of them. There was at any time, there were about 5 or 6 panels at a time.
Yeah, I don't like, I have to say, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, you wanted to be
a little fewer? A couple less per hour.
Less at least.
There are a lot of tough decisions to make about which one to see.
I was cross-scheduled with so many things that I would have gone to.
Yeah, I did half and half a lot of times, where I would be half of a panel and go to another, and I didn't have that much time for panels because I had plenty.
As it happens, the probably the top 5 panels I would have gone to.
Yeah.
were cross-scheduled. Like those happen to be the ones. It's just bad luck, I guess. But it did happen to me. Like Jinx and Sanrixian, they had panels that I really wanted to go to, just for an example. And the YouTuber meet and greet, which we're YouTubers obviously right now, cross-scheduled with that. So there's 3 off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's one of those kind of good problems to have, that you have so much to do that it's a wealth of opportunity, but you feel really bad missing things. There's so many people to talk to, and that was the other factor of the con being much larger than we expected, was that the impact of people not having enough time to talk to everybody was magnified. It was even worse because there's so many more people to talk to.
It's also good that they have the audio recordings. You have the opportunity to listen to the panels later. And I'm sure they'll find like the sweet spot. This is a relatively new con, so exactly how to manage it all is going to be tricky.
Super chat from Lady Dillsdale. It was great meeting the 3 of you at the con. Great meeting you too, Christina. Super fun. We loved hanging out with you.
Yeah, she was great. I love talking to her. She's one of the Blackwater bays. I was in that. We hung out in a hot tub together, and it was quite nice. And I will say, she, a little thing about her is that her and her husband, they created their last name by mashing their last names together, which is something I've always been intrigued by. Yeah, I've always talked about it as like, why don't more people do it? And they just created a new last name. I think it's really cool.
That is a really good idea. It's the kind of thing that we would do around here, for our fandom, not for real life, but they did it in real life.
In real life, I would do it. Aziz and I, for example, both have hyphenated names. How do you ever combine that? Except by just mashing them together in one word. I don't know. But anyways, props to her and her husband for doing that.
Yeah, that was very cool. Very cool. Well, any other thoughts, Sean, before we say adios to everybody?
Yeah, I'm you have the thing. It's like if you're trying to like name your top song or band or something. Well, if I name this one, I have to name this one. If I name that one, I have either 20 more thoughts or I have to cut it off. So.
Well,
cut it off.
Thank you to all the people we didn't have time to name. There were so many great panels and moments and people we saw in costumes and people we talked to.
I had one more. I didn't put an image of it. I can't believe I didn't grab the image. But Shakespeare of Thrones did Alyssa Farman.
Oh, yeah.
And Mary was Rhaena, and they got a picture of the distracted boyfriend meme, Alyssa looking at the dragon eggs. And anyways, just a highlight of my week. I can't believe I didn't grab a picture.
It just goes to show how many amazing moments there were. If that can slip your mind, it was some of an incredible moment, then there's got other things to slip our mind too.
I was on Steven Stark's stream, and I didn't until the last moment, right before I left. I was like, oh wait, this great, and right now again.
Actually, that's a great point. Also, shout out to Sam Adolfo, who we had so much fun with.
Yeah.
But speaking of Steven Stark, check out Steven Stark's channel and check out Tony Teflon's channel. Both of them did con recaps that more of these stories are present. So there's a few repeats, but some things that we didn't get to talk about.
And lots of other people, because we didn't have any guests here, because as you can see, we had a lot to say.
And on Tony's stream, there's an extra bonus. Kate Dickey showed up. That's why I mentioned Sam Adolfo, because Sam was hanging out with Kate. So Kate just got on the stream for a few minutes and talked about, she wasn't at this con, but she was at prior Con of Thrones, and she's a big hit. Everybody loves her. So extra bonus there.
So I guess I'll go ahead and get one more thought, is that we have these highlight moments, these cool costumes and these people we met and these panels that we did. But as you can imagine, just the way life is, there's a million other subtle little memories that come from this that aren't maybe not even quite story worthy on a podcast, but just like the meals we had in Nashville, Tennessee. The road trips and just the conversations
did you go
you have.
Anywhere, Sean, and have a special meal?
Yeah, there was it was so convenient because it was literally across the street. There was this tacos apparently are big, at least in Nashville. Or I think Rita got tacos twice, 2 different places. Yeah, and they were vegetarian friendly, by the way. Yeah.
I ate in the hotel bar, like lounges.
Yeah. I ate there plenty as well.
That was the and at home at the Airbnb.
I mostly ate at the hospitality suite.
I had quail eggs. I cooked quail eggs, by the way. Cooked quail eggs.
And I'm the one who pressed.
Shay made that happen.
I made it happen.
But again, that's not so much like some panel at the con, but it was like this moment I had when I could. They're just like regular eggs. They're just like tiny, like the size of your thumb. Just like
I probably drank a metric ton of coffee during the convention. All right, so that does it for this stream. Thanks again to everyone for coming. Thanks y'all for watching and spreading the love and liking and sharing our content. We will be doing a Valar Rereadus semi-private live stream tomorrow. If you'd like to attend, hit us up on Facebook or send us a message. If you're a patron or regular donator, you should already have the links. They're also posted in our Facebook group and in our Flick group, which you can join. There is a link in the YouTube comment section, or not in the YouTube, sorry, the YouTube description, as well as in the description for the podcast version of this. Thanks to Michael Klarfeld for our music. Thanks to Joey, our music, not the music, Michael Klarfeld for our maps and video intro. Thanks to Joey Townsend and Jesse Coal for the music. Thanks to Ashea for all the amazing production running, handling all the problems as they come up, which we had a good example today.
Thanks to Casanova, our cat, for massaging me throughout this stream.
Well, he is over there giving her a massage right now. He's making some muffins on her lap. Good boy. And yeah, so we'll see you in about a month, Sean.
I hope this doesn't make sense. He's rubbing up against the microphone.
You know, one other shout out, one other thing I feel like I needed to make sure to mention was Kieran Belshaw.
Oh yeah.
The art designer. We all had some very personal conversations with him.
Yeah.
About his role on Game of Thrones, which is really
him
awesome.
On Twitter, if you look up Kieran Belshaw, he's got some great concept art from his work on the show. But yeah, we've asked him. I reached out to him on Twitter about asking if he would, want to join us to talk about his work, and he is interested. So
cool.
And he has the coolest business cards I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, talk about that.
Also, shout out to the Geek Chat One folks who did a lot of arranging of side events, which was really added to the con experience. And anyone else I forgot, I apologize. I'm sure we forgot some people because there are so many and it's a blur. So thanks to
shout out to you, Aziz, for talking for so long.
Why, thank you.
Aziz never loses his voice either.
I have never lost my voice my
entire
entire life.
Seasoned throat.
Yeah, by the way, at the con, I had to cut the night short at night. Just all the conversations, music, and parties, stuff like that. I'm like, I gotta go home. I can't do a panel tomorrow like this. Yeah.
I was like, I can do a panel with a hoarse, scratchy voice. I can do it. It's maybe some people dislike it, but lots of people like it.
Yeah, scratchy voice is kind of cool. It can be kind of sexy. I have a bad stomach and a good voice. That's the trade off for me. I can hardly handle liquor, but I can handle talking. So thanks to the mysterious BR, Hand of the King. Thanks to Lord Stephen Stark, titles, Hand of Queen Ashea, who's known as the best. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire blog is Warden of the West. That's AKA Something Like a Lawyer, who I did a panel with that you should be able to hear, called Death of the Other, where we talk about how humanity can fight against the others and the whites in the books. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning, Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Cabeth the Unfrozen, Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light, Defender of the Old Gods and Warden of the North. Lady Kelly McMath of Covington is Lady of the Villa Hills and Crescent Springs, Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle is King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, Commander of the Royal Fleet, consisting of the Narrow Fleet led by Flagship Caraxes and the Bloodstone Fleet led by Flagship Prince Daemon. Now, I think Lord James Tuttle was intrigued by seeing some of the strange things in Nashville. He had spies there. He wasn't there in person. But there's this strange thing that happens in Nashville. It's apparently the bachelorette party capital of the world, and you see constantly these buses going around that are party buses with the top is removed. People are just standing on the bus drinking.
Sometimes they're pedal taverns.
That's what I was getting to, is these strange pedal rides where there's a giant bus where every seat is like a bike where every single person is pedaling.
It's like the Flintstones.
Yes. And so he's interested in making some ships using this design. So instead of rowing, you can have the Bloodstone fleet could be pedaled instead of oared. So we'll see how that works out. King Beyond the Wall, Sidney Jesse, is the Fallborn, Lord of Blue Spring in the Haunted Forest. He wields a dagger of Dragonglass and the Valyrian steel blade Red Frost. Now, after seeing Little Bear's foam version of a Valyrian steel dagger, or of a Dragonglass dagger, he's interested in upgrading to that. He doesn't want real Dragonglass. It shatters too easily, but foam, you can stab people repeatedly with that, and it just bounces right back. Lady Sarah Connolly, the willful, wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure, is Jenny's patron. We have White Walker patrons nowadays. First Walker Tanneman is wielder of Blue Sister, went north of the wall in search of the most refreshing brew, where the mountains are always blue. Turned White Walker, but still in search for the elusive Blue Mountains, can't rest until I complete my quest. Araya Flint of the Mountain Flints, captured by the Weeper, only to be raised in the valley of the Milkwater, blue eyes and golden memories. Alexander Greyblood is first of the first men, now crowned in ice, called Silence Bringer, Wood Blinder, and Snow of Night, wielder of the ice-forged greatsword Palefrost. Our small council includes Lord Daniel the Sneaky Russian, Master of Ships, Grand Maester Viajames, Lord Benjen of House Hornwood, Master of Laws, Lord Fabian Flowers, the Bastard of Greenshield, Master of Coin, and Lord Johann of House Orcos, called Shadowhawk, Master of Whispers. Lady Direliz of Castle Naki is the Alpha Patron. Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell is Breaker of the Second Stone. Gregor the Toasty is Lord of the Bread Fort. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate is Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Ashlyn Winter is the Hawk's Eye, Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is leader of the Werewood Protectorate Alliance. The Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Machete Everglazed. Lord Alistair Whitaker is Lord of the Dawnhold. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny is Guardian Ranger of the Hidden 100-Acre Werewood, dual wielder of Valyrian Short Swords Glorious Morning and Little Light Wise, sharpshooter of the Werewood and Ironwood Laminated Longbow Todd Von Oben. The Bastard of the Wolfswood is First Forester of the Old Gods. He's sworn to the House Iron Werewood. Listen, for the silence is their motto. Lady Liana Kelly of Wolf Island is Protectress of the Steelhold. Casey Stark is of House Acres. Lady Kay of House Archer is Lady of Earthdog Hall, Huntress of the Wolfswood, and Guardian of Maddie Squirrelsbane, the Mighty Direweenie. Lady Raywin of House Dillsdane is the Star Spear.
You're still on cracking up. Keep it to himself.
Peter Rivers is the Pale Dragon and heir to Bloodraven. Lady Carlin Carey of Castle Stone Sharp, whose horse is shod in Valyrian steel, is Lady Rider of the Rising Hills. Lord Brendan Lannister is the Bloodlion, ruler of Castle Everroar. King's Justice Sir Troy the Steady is wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade Fate. And Ashaya's Queen's High Council's coming up here.
Bloody Ben Blackwood, Master of Whisperers. Rebea Stareyes, Lady of Waves and Mistress of Ships. Captain of the Iron Shadowcat. In the shadows we bear our claws. Katrin the Wise of House Trondheim, Master of Coin. Grand Maester Elizabeth, middle daughter of Lyanna Mormont, First Lady to forge both the silver and Valyrian steel link, and Laura Boros, the Lady of Infinity, Master of the Laws, and apparently a dragon?
Yeah, that's part of how you can become infinite, is turning into a dragon. Our Kingsguard is led by Lord Commander Miriam R., backed up by Sir Dolorous D., longest tenured White Sword, Sir Dean the White, Knight of the Black Star, Sir Jord of House Pepsi, the Beverage Knight, Gregor Snow, called Snowbear, a bastard of Winterfell. Sir Glennon of House Leanne, called Lion Cloak. Sir Jen Seaworth, Knight of the Southern Snows. Queensguard.
My Queensguard is led by Lord Captain Commander Jaime Helminth, the Sellsword Sentinel. Alexander of House Atreides, from the seat of Dune. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Becca the Bard, Songbird of the North. Michonne the Melodious, Star of Old Town. Minds over Masters. Ser Rambo, Knight of House Gannon, First Blood. Ser Leon of House Walker, wielder of the twin Valyrian steel blades Fire and Ice, and the Werewood bow Rain. And Amber the Adamant, the Knight of the Mist and Mother of Squids.
Right on. And the Beard Guard.
As mentioned before, Lord Commander George the Golden, Sir Joshua Oakhart, the White Oak, Lady Rita of the Coppermane, the Unbound, Dance the Fervor.
Hi, Rita.
Sir Joff, Warden of the AC, wielder of Triad, the multifaceted beard of Platinum, Red, and Brown, Stay Frosty. And Tim Cargoyle, Mad Boy.
Titles.
Sir Tim Corgyle, Mad Boy of the Western Desert.
Heck yeah. And of course, a couple of first off, the History of Westeros Night's Watch is led by Lord Commander Benjen Umber, the Silent Giant, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Greatsword Winter's Kiss, backed up by First Builder Maegor Snow, a.k.a. Maegor the Cool, the Fire in the Snow. First Steward Sir Jurion of the Torrentine, called Pale Wind, and First Ranger Sir Source Delica of House Gramercy. A couple of new names around the block here as well that I like to throw out every once in a while. We got Tiffany the Tamer, no task too tall. Steerav Pike, called Ironworm, a bastard of Lords Port and Volantis. Teresa M. of House Audley, crowned in Weird. And Simini, the wanderer of Westeros, known for her copper hair, her werewood mandolin, and her strange dusky dagger. But who is she? Also, a shout out to Shanley, the she-wolf of House Clark, wisdom of the pack, who was present in today's chat. Thank you. Lady Lauren Blackwood, voice of the old gods, a sound sweeter than silence. Ksenia Stonespear, striker from afar.
Have you shouted out to the Ed Tollett one I liked?
I don't think I have.
I like this one a lot. Ridiculous Ed Tollett. If I must.
That's so
That's a
good.
heavy sigh.
The heavy sigh is part of the motto.
Yes.
Sir Jorgen of Bloodstone is the Night Knight. Yeah, Lady Lakshana is Shield of the Sages. Sir Seth Copeland is Knight of the True North, strong and free. Rickard the Regal of House Grimlock, victory has no room for the weak. Josh the Dark Knight. Lady Chelsea is, whoops, I lost it. Lady Chelsea is the Blonde Wolf, mistress of the Western Slope. And let's see, a couple more thrown in here. I love reading these names. Let's go with, whoops, lost my place. Let's go with Bailey Bloodaxe, the Warrior's Chosen. Lord Brock of House Blacktree, the Badger King.
That's a lot of alliteration.
Yeah, right? Sir Raywin Hill, Bastard of the Rock. Hild, the Hermit Mystic, Guardian of the Redwood Grove. Gandalf, the White Lord of House Seamorn. We've got at least one or two other new ones I want to read. Rhys, the Renewer, the Lady of Ash and Rebirth. Sir Mikkel of House Redwood, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade, Forest Fire, and a Redwood Longbow. And the Black Ash of House Reed, wielder of the Quarterstaff Fraxinus Nigra. And Lisa, Water Witch of Dorne. Rounds out the last list of new names for now.
I also didn't mention my hand,
Oh, Lady Suzanne.
Lady Suzanne Sinistrol.
That's right. Who we also got to hang out. It was great to see you there, Suzanne, as well. Good times, fun times, and we'll do it all again next year. Okay, folks, thanks again. We will see you next time. On behalf of Ashea and Sean, Valar Reread us.
Valar Reedus, as it may be.